Chapter 358. The woman looked to be around 28 years old. She had a tall nose, bright red lips, and short dark red hair that draped over her shoulders, perfectly revealing her delicate earlobes and collarbones. She was wearing a mature female uniform, and just her curves alone were enough to make people blush, not to mention the seductive snow-white cleavage that was exposed in front of her chest. She catwalked down the corridor, and when she saw Caesar and the others, she threw a flirtatious glance in their direction, then shook her hair and disappeared around the corner of the elevator. "Who is she?" Eddie touched his nose. He felt like he had seen this woman somewhere before, but he couldn't remember where. The poison that was normally active in his body was now silent as if it was hibernating. "Humph, you men like this kind of woman." Annie, who was walking in front, snorted. As a woman, it seemed like she didn't have a good impression of this kind of sexy woman. She said with a bit of dissatisfaction, "She's not from our company. She's just a legal secretary of a partner company. She probably has a project to discuss with the deputy manager. She's been coming to our office building a lot these days." Caesar nodded thoughtfully. Although the woman had put on makeup and looked different from before, he recognized her the moment he saw her. The Black Widow, Natasha. After all, she was a talent that he had poached from the Red Room organization. Later, under the name of Family Cal, she was lent to SHELD, which was managed by Fry. No matter how he looked at it, she was one of them, so there was no way he would mistake her. Natasha was here, which meant that SHELD had attached great importance to the recent situation of Stark Industries. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent Natasha, who was half a hero, to investigate. Natasha was now the bridge between SHELD and the Avengers. Coupled with her third identity in Family Cal, the power behind her was simply terrifying. Caesar's eyes didn't stay on Natasha for long. It was just a casual glance. Not to mention other people's suspicions, even Natasha didn't know that her identity had been exposed. "Assistant manager?" Caesar muttered softly. 9 out of 10 people who were targeted by Natasha would suffer, and one would be very unlucky. Annie didn't dare to be negligent and turned to look at Caesar. She then asked with a slight smile, "Young master is so young, you must not know about the current situation of Stark Industries." Caesar nodded. Without the vice by his side, collecting information would not be as easy as when he was in his original body. Annie wondered where she should start. After thinking for a while, she earnestly said, "Half a year ago, Stark Industries operated according to the instructions of Chairman Stark Tani. Whether it was the general direction of development of various industries, the design and release of new products, the construction of manufacturing plants, etc., a series of corporate strategies were all formulated by him alone." Speaking of Stark Tani, Annie's tone was filled with admiration and respect. She had the same expression when she talked about the symbol of peace. Caesar's lips curled up slightly. Tani and his father, Howard, were very similar. Due to their arrogance as geniuses, they were both dictators to a certain extent and couldn't tolerate the opinions and interference of a third party. In the field of technology and manufacturing, they were gods. They were always right and walked at the forefront to guide the trends of the times. But in the past half a year, Annie said hesitantly. She stuttered and looked around to see if there were any other colleagues present. Eddie narrowed his eyes and asked, "It was after Mr. Stark Tani left Stark Industries, right?" "That's right." Annie sighed softly and said dejectedly, "The chairman's departure caused Stark Industries to suddenly lose its backbone. Many of the same industry giants are secretly stirring up trouble and often join forces to attack Stark Industries in the business field. Fortunately, Stark Industries has a deep foundation and isn't something they can easily shake. But without Mr. Stark, our industry has lost its offensive sword in the business world. We can only erect a shield to defend against the attacks of others. I'm afraid that's not all. Since there are external problems, are there no internal problems?" Caesar blinked and took out a lollipop from his pocket. He opened the plastic wrapper and put it in his mouth. Annie looked at Caesar in surprise. She didn't dare to treat him like a child. She nodded and replied, "There were some problems in the beginning. Fortunately, there were two managers to share the burden and take charge of the overall situation." After going around in a circle, it still came back to the mentioned manager of Stark Industries. Annie said, during the days when the chairman wasn't around, the assistant manager was the first to take charge. He was responsible for the design and development of new products in the industry, as well as the cooperation with related enterprises. At first, almost all the employees of Stark Industries didn't think that the deputy manager could replace Mr. Stark-Tani. But in the past 6 months, it was because of the deputy manager that our industry was able to stabilize its position. She was a little reserved, but the meaning behind it was obvious. The deputy manager couldn't be said to be better than Tani, but he could clean up the mess after Tani left. It could be imagined that he was also a technological manufacturing genius. Caesar bit the candy and reminded her, "Annie, you haven't properly introduced the deputy manager to us." "Oh, that's true." Annie patted her forehead and didn't waste her love for him. She said seriously, "The deputy manager is called Aldrich Killian. He's a Jew. He's an extremely smart biological scientist, but he doesn't have the quirks of a genius. He treats people very well." Aldrich Killian? Caesar was slightly stunned. This name gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Now, only the heroes and villains that appeared in the original work could leave some traces in his mind. Before he thought too much, Eddie, who was driving, asked curiously, "What about the general manager? You don't even know the general manager?" Annie rolled her eyes at Eddie. She had a completely different attitude towards Eddie and Caesar. She said with a slightly cold face, "The general manager is the former Mr. Stark-Tani's personal secretary, Pepper Potts. She's mainly responsible for the human resources and operations of the industry. I actually know her." Eddie's eyes widened. If he had known that Miss Potts was the general manager, he wouldn't have been unable to enter the industry's office building just now. Potts and Yutong didn't interact very frequently, but they did interact quite often. "Okay, it's decided." Caesar flicked his little finger lightly. After eating the candy, the remaining candy flew a few meters and accurately threw it into the trash can in the corridor. "Young master, what is it now?" Aid asked nervously when he heard that. Caesar ignored him and said to Annie, "Annie, bring us to the general manager's office." With Caesar's status, he naturally gave the green light all the way. Under Annie's guidance, they went straight to the general manager's office. Potts had already received the smart notification, but due to work, she didn't rush downstairs in time. So when Caesar came to her office, she was so excited that she didn't have a dignified demeanor. She rushed forward and hugged Caesar, who hadn't spoken yet. "Tani, you can't blame me for this." Caesar's little face was covered by her towering chest. He held his breath and helplessly shouted in his heart. Chapter 359. Inside the general manager's office. Caesar was finally released after Potts intimately rubbed his face and body. He sat down on the office chair seriously and waved his hand at Eddie. "Eddie, go outside first. I have something to say to Miss Potts." "Yes, young master." Eddie was also very straightforward as he turned around and walked towards the office door. Potts looked at Caesar with incomparable surprise and then looked at Eddie's back. She originally thought that it was just Eddie bringing Caesar for a stroll. She didn't expect that Caesar would be the one in charge. Actually, if it was anyone else, they would intuitively think that Caesar was just a child when they saw him. After all, he was really too young. Even if he said that he had mature thoughts and ideas, not many people would believe it. "You are?" Potts' beautiful eyes moved and her gaze turned to Annie, who was still in the office. There were too many employees in Stark Industries. Even the office workers were counted in the thousands. She really couldn't remember a new employee who worked in the same building. Annie was a little nervous as she respectfully bowed and said, "Hello, General Manager. I'm a junior employee of the 3rd Operation Department who has been here for less than half a month. My name is Annie Wei-Ying." "Annie Wei-Ying?" Potts suddenly said, "I've seen this name before." "Right, yesterday you and another employee were attacked by criminals at night." "Yes. This is all thanks to young Master Caesar. If it wasn't for him taking care of those criminals, I'm afraid I would have already." Annie shuddered when she recalled last night. She looked at Caesar, who was sitting on the chair with incomparable gratitude. When Potts heard her words, she couldn't help but cover her slightly opened mouth with her hand to hide her shock. After silently digesting the information for a few seconds, she instructed Annie and Eddie to wait outside the door together. Annie hurriedly nodded and walked out of the office in her high heels, closing the door behind her. Only Potts and Caesar were left in the office. They stared at each other in silence for a while before Potts sighed. "Half a year ago, when Cale's godfather brought you to Tawny's villa, you were barely the size of a football. Now you've grown so big." "How is this considered big?" Caesar's mouth twitched. He raised his hands and looked at his small, white arms. "By the way, did you just call me Miss Potts?" Potts raised her pretty face in dissatisfaction. She sat on the office chair and crossed her long legs that were wrapped in black stockings. Caesar spread out his hands. "Then what should we call them?" Potts smiled and suggested, "You Tong and I are very close. We are as close as sisters. Why don't you call me Aunt?" "No." Caesar was unusually firm in his opposition. "That's true. You're godfather's child. Calling me that would mess up the seniority. Then call me Pepper." Potts was a little helpless. Cale's seniority was too high. She reckoned that no one would be able to surpass Caesar. "Okay." Caesar nodded. "My young master, why are you running outside instead of staying at home? New York is not as safe as it used to be." Potts' words had a hidden meaning. There was a hint of worry in her eyes. It was obvious that the negative news about Stark Industries and the attack on her employees had drained her mentally and physically. "Sure enough, do you still think I'm a child?" Caesar sighed slightly and stood up from the chair without thinking too much. Under Potts' incredulous gaze, he ignored gravity and the laws of physics and floated up like a balloon. No matter how persuasive words were, it was better to use actual performance to prove it. "Pepper." After flying around the room, Caesar held the back of his head with both hands and lay in the empty air. He looked down at Potts and said seriously, "If Stark Industries has any problems, you can tell me directly. Tawny isn't here, so the industrial matters should be handled by our family Cal." If it wasn't for his youthful appearance and childish tone, he would have been convincing enough. Potts took a deep breath and looked up at Caesar in the air. She exclaimed, "I should say, as expected of your family. Longevity, superpowers, and so on are like natural inheritances to you guys." Caesar smiled. "It should be our family. Won't you be one of us in the future?" "You." Potts' face flushed red. She said angrily, "You even know how to tease me. You don't have the seriousness and majesty of Cale's godfather at all." "Am I not Cale? It's just that I've changed my body and identity." Caesar rolled his eyes. Unlike his original body, his current baby body didn't have any burden on his image at all. However, after a short conversation, not only did Potts become much closer to Caesar, but she also completely threw away her prejudice against him due to his age and saw him as a mature person of the same age. Then let's get back to the main topic. Potts began to tell Caesar about the recent situation in the industrial industry. It was similar to what she learned from Eddie and Annie. In the end, she hesitated and said, several of the missing employees were from the new product development department that the deputy manager was in charge of. "You suspect that there's something wrong with him," Caesar said. Potts flipped her hair. It's not just me. SHELD is also suspicious, but they haven't found any evidence. Caesar understood. That was why Natasha came in disguise and took the opportunity to get close to the deputy manager. She wanted to find some evidence and clues from him. Potts sighed and said, "Aldrich Killian is a gentleman. He does things flawlessly. He's a top scientist in the field of biology and weapons manufacturing. If it wasn't for the recent situation, I really didn't want to suspect him." Stark Industries, which had lost Iron Man Tawny, wasn't something that could be easily taken over by ordinary people. "Don't worry. Since I'm here, all the problems are no longer problems." Caesar smiled. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. His childish little face was full of confidence. "What do you want to do?" Potts was infected by his confidence and asked with slight anticipation. Caesar landed on the table and stretched out a finger. "It's very simple. You just need to let the people from SHELD continue to monitor the deputy manager called Killian as usual. It doesn't matter even if they find out." "And then?" Potts blinked. "Secondly, give me the location where the employees were attacked." Caesar stretched out a second finger and said with certainty, "Next, you just need to wait for news from my side." They didn't stay in the general manager's office for long. After Caesar finished giving instructions, he left Stark Industries with Eddie. They rushed to a nearby street before the sky turned dark. Downtown New York, beside 958 South Road. There were still some police cordons that hadn't been taken down. The floor and walls of the alley had burn marks, and the charred outlines of several people could be vaguely seen. The scene was very frightening under the bright red sunset. "Young master, what are we doing here?" The police, forensics, SHELD, and even Family Cal's people have all been here. They didn't find any clues. Eddie scratched his head and asked Caesar, who was on his shoulder, in confusion. Caesar's gaze locked onto the burned area where the employees were attacked. The feeling of being in control of the situation returned. He replied in a bad mood, "What do you know? What I see is different from what you see." He could ignore the limitations of the human eye and directly see the original essence of the world. Caesar snorted softly and said in a young and confident voice, "More or less. But if we want to determine the direction of escape of the person who launched the attack, we can't rely on the hidden information provided by this location." "Why?" "Because the ambusher self-destructed and was erased from this world along with the other two employees." Caesar's words made Eddie's whole body tremble, which led to new doubts. But there were no traces of explosives at the scene. "Are you really stupid, or are you thinking too much? Who said that only explosives could self-destruct? What if the ambusher's body was the source of the explosion?" Caesar finished speaking in a bad mood. He didn't plan to stay here any longer and walked directly in the direction of the motorcycle. Eddie saw this and hurriedly followed. His body and brain couldn't keep up, so he continued to ask in confusion, "Young master, where are we going?" Caesar's face was calm, and he said without hesitation, "Aren't there other places that were attacked? Check them one by one." For the rest of the time, Eddie and Caesar drove their motorcycles through the streets. They investigated the locations where the first to the third ambush had taken place. The corpses were destroyed cleanly, and there was not a single clue left behind in the charred area. Caesar's eyes became brighter and brighter until they reached the fourth place, which was the place where the most recent attack happened yesterday. "Caught you," Caesar muttered to himself. From a corner not far from the scorched area, he held a half-melted small piece of metal in his hand. If the terrorist organization targeting Stark Industries sent cannon fodder to carry out the attack every time, it would be too difficult to find clues. However, it was clear that after the first few flawless successes, their courage had finally grown a little. The person who carried out the fourth attack was not a kamikaze. This time, the self-destruct had killed the mission target and fled the scene. Caesar looked at the small piece of metal in his hand seriously. He didn't need any detection tools. His eyes were 100 times more unfathomable than any scientific laser scanning. At this moment, it was as if he saw an invisible long line following an imperceptible trail into the distance. "Eddie, follow me." This time, Caesar didn't sit back on Eddie's shoulder. His small floating body trembled slightly. Then, as if he was carrying a rocket on his back, he suddenly accelerated and rushed out. He rose more than 10 meters high and quickly accelerated to the speed of sound and flew into the distant night sky. Eddie was dumbfounded. He looked at the motorcycle parked on the side and then looked at Caesar, who was about to leave. He ran to catch up with the figure in the air and didn't forget to shout, "Toxin, help me." "Got it." With a cold snort from Toxin, Eddie's front foot was wrapped by a layer of black stratum corneum as soon as he took a step. It formed a strong visual impact of muscles and shells. He squatted down and then stomped on the ground with both feet. With a leap that was full of impact, several cracks appeared on the cement ground, and circles of white dust spread outwards like waves. Eddie's 2-meter-tall black armored body shot out like a missile. During this time, he flexibly used the forest of buildings as pedals and chased after Caesar, who was flying at supersonic speed. 10 minutes later. Charming Bar, Queens. The loud explosive sound in the inner ballroom shook the eardrums. Under the colorful flashing neon lights, a group of mature and beautiful girls and shirtless men were dancing freely. The waitresses in sexy clothes came and went with drinks from time to time. The black-haired young man pushed the door and entered. He let the sound hit him and lowered his head to the boy sitting on his shoulder. He sighed and said, "Young master, can you slow down next time? You don't have to be like this even if you're in a hurry, right?" It was Eddie and Caesar. The two of them crossed more than 10 kilometers in a short time and arrived at another jurisdiction in New York. "Don't talk nonsense. He's in here." Caesar looked at the crowd in the bar's ballroom coldly. "The fourth criminal who attacked Stark's employees," Eddie whispered seriously. He raised his spirits, pushed people away with both hands, and began to go deeper into the crowded ballroom. When the surrounding customers saw the pair of Eddie and Caesar, they looked at them strangely from time to time. It was normal for a man to bring a girl to this event, and sometimes people would bring pets. However, it was the first time that a man brought a child to this event. Chapter 361. Inside the bar's ballroom. The trendy music was like a wave of sound, crashing into the men and women who were crazily twisting their bodies inside. The neon lights on the ceiling made them look like colorful beasts, throwing themselves into the music to release the stress of the day's work, or looking for food to satisfy the primitive lust of the lower half of their bodies. Eddie pushed through the crowd with his hands with some difficulty, and with great difficulty, merged into the cheering and dancing crowd. Caesar sat steadily on Eddie's left shoulder, and no matter how he walked, there was no sign of him falling. His small hand held a small piece of metal that was suspected to have been dropped by the attacker, and his large eyes coldly scanned the front. "We're close." Some animals that evolved in a different direction could find their target through their nose or eyes that were far superior to humans, not to mention Caesar, who had extraordinary facial features. As long as the criminal was still alive in this world, there would be no way for them to escape from his hunt. Caesar ordered, "Toxin, use your perception to see if there are any humans around here who have energy beyond that of ordinary adults." "Yes, young master." Toxin was far more tactful than Eddie, and knew who had the biggest card at the moment, so he immediately agreed and skipped over Eddie to use his perception. "Fence-sitter," Eddie cursed under his breath, but became more serious as he scanned the unfamiliar faces with a patrolling gaze. Just as the three of them fully activated their perception and detection, a pleasantly surprised female voice rang out from behind them. "Ah, what a coincidence." Caesar turned around and saw a blonde girl squeezing out of the crowd. Her delicate face was beautifully made up, and her lips were red and her skin was white. She wore a white tube-top dress that only reached her knees, and her youthful and charming curves were fully displayed. Eddie also turned around, and when he saw the youthful and charming blonde, he sighed as if he had stepped in dog poop. "Why is it you again?" Caesar also found it strange that the person in front of him was Annie Wei-Ying. He didn't know if her luck was good or bad, to run into them everywhere. The first time, Caesar had saved her. The second day, he had run into her again in the office building of Stark Industries. This time, he had run into her again when he was chasing the criminal to Queens. "Why can't it be me?" Annie snorted with her hands on her hips. Before she could explain, two other beautiful women squeezed out from behind her. "Annie, did you meet someone you know?" one of the blonde girls asked, while the other red-haired girl covered her mouth and snickered. They were all around 25 years old, and their beauty was rare. Each of them had their own characteristics, and they were dressed in beautiful dresses that showed off their figures. When they stood together, they attracted the burning gazes of many men around them. Caesar blinked. It was another familiar face, and an old one at that. One was Jane Foster, Thor's long-distance girlfriend, and the other was naturally her good friend, Lucy Louise, the intellectual woman who had confessed to his main body half a year ago. 3 missing 1. Did they have enough people to play mahjong tonight? Annie waved her hand and didn't even look at Eddie. She stared straight at Caesar, who was on his shoulder, and said softly, "These are my 2 good friends from university, Jane Foster and Lucy Louise. Come out and meet them after work tonight." "Nice to meet you." "What a cool guy." Jane and Lucy both mistakenly thought that Annie was introducing them to Eddie, so they didn't put on any pretense and took the initiative to shake hands with Eddie with smiles on their faces. "Just call me Eddie," Eddie responded with a smile. Annie looked at him with dissatisfaction and warned, "I'm telling you, don't even think about hitting on the 2 of them. Jane has a violent boyfriend. As for Lucy, she already has someone she likes. No matter what, it won't be your turn." "Annie, what are you talking about? I don't have a boyfriend. If there's someone suitable, I don't mind falling in love." Jane's face was cold. It was obvious that Thor's disappearance had made her very unhappy for the past 6 months. That boyfriend she picked up might have died in the divine realm, right? Jane thought angrily and worriedly. Lucy, on the other hand, lowered her head shyly. Her charming face was tinged with a faint pink, looking even more tempting to commit a crime. "By the way, who is this child?" After chatting for a while, Jane and Lucy quickly noticed Caesar on Eddie's shoulder. They both widened their eyes and asked in surprise. Annie said with a smile, "His identity will definitely give you a big shock." Before she could finish, Eddie suddenly trembled. The poison in his body had an urgent notification. Target found. "Eddie, there's a man about 5 meters to your left. He's wearing a leather jacket and a black hat. He has an energy value that exceeds that of a normal human." Eddie glanced sideways and saw a tall man wearing a leather jacket and a hat. He had his back to them and seemed to be leaving towards the back corridor of the ballroom. "Young master, you stay here. I'm going to catch the target." Eddie finished quickly and immediately took Caesar off his shoulder and stuffed him directly into Annie's arms. Then, he buried his head in the crowd and chased after the target man. "What are you going to do?" Annie subconsciously hugged Caesar tightly and looked at Eddie's back with Jane and Lucy in surprise. Caesar muttered discontentedly, "That guy, why is he in such a hurry? Also, he won't leave me behind as a burden, will he?" On the other side. The target man was in front and Eddie was chasing closely behind. The 2 of them kept leaving the ballroom and finally arrived at the deserted back corridor where there were few customers. "Where are you going?" Eddie took a big stride and closed the final distance. When he was close to the target man's back, he reached out and put his hand on his shoulder. "I should be the one asking you this question." The target snorted coldly. He didn't have any intention of escaping. His body sank and twisted, and he instantly got rid of Eddie's palm. Then, he stretched out his hands at lightning speed and used a counterattack technique to restrain Eddie's left arm. Eddie was shocked and tried to pull his arm back. However, the opponent's hands had an inhuman strength, like a pair of iron pliers. His ordinary body could not break free no matter how hard he tried. At this time, the target man spoke into the microphone on his collar again calmly, "You can do it now." "Oh no, they have help." Eddie was a little panicked and hurriedly said, "Toxin, hurry up and help." "Do I need you to tell me that?" Toxin responded hoarsely. The next moment, black liquid appeared on Eddie's chest. The target man's blue pupils contracted slightly. With his inhuman reaction, before he could react, the black liquid condensed into a monster's claw and slapped him heavily. "Paw!" The target man flew out without warning, directly smashing through the wooden back door behind him, and rolling 10 meters out on the street along with the broken wood shavings. "Go!" Eddie's whole body was covered in the poisonous liquid. He turned into a black monster that was born purely for battle. His long and narrow eyes flashed with a cold light. He rushed out violently. His huge body made of muscle fibers broke through the walls around the back door. Accompanied by a wave of dust, he attacked the target man who was still lying on the ground. Whoosh! A modified mechanical arrow, flashing a small red light, suddenly pierced into the battlefield from a nearby street building, trying to block Eddie's attack. Eddie, who was covered in poison, did not care and chose to ignore it. However, when the arrow fell on his body, it turned into a high-explosive grenade and caused a powerful explosion. Chapter 362. Late at night, in a secluded street behind the bar. Boom! A dazzling burst of fire suddenly exploded, and the explosive wave instantly covered the rampaging Eddie completely. Strong winds surged and slapped the surrounding open area in a disorderly manner. The target was relieved that the crisis was over. He knelt on the ground and struggled to get up with one hand. He gave a thumbs up in the direction of the rooftop. "Well done." On the rooftop of the building, a mysterious man with a special bow in his hand and a quiver of arrows on his back was squatting on the 10-meter-high wall. He looked down at the area below with a pair of sharp, dark eyes. Just when he thought he had successfully killed the target and was about to put down the bow, a sharp and terrifying roar suddenly came from the explosion. The expression of the target man changed drastically as well. He raised his head and saw a huge black shadow rushing out of the dust. Its tough muscles and shell were black and shiny. It was not damaged at all when it was hit by an explosion that was even more powerful than a high-explosive grenade. Furthermore, it continued to launch a violent and powerful attack forward. This monster, is it Hulk's brother? The target man did not have time to think. After all, Eddie was already in front of him and was swinging his fists down. He could only roll on the ground like a fish in a sorry state, narrowly avoiding the monstrous punch that was covered in poison. But the concrete floor of the street was not so lucky. Under the impact of the amazing punch, it immediately shattered and cracked like a piece of tofu, collapsing into a hole with a radius of 1 meter. If one looked at the center, one could even see the underground sewer. The target man rolled a few times to avoid the attack. With his hands on the floor, he jumped up with a beautiful bounce. He looked at the shocking fist pit not far away and swallowed his saliva. He stabilized the cap on his head and said helplessly into the communication microphone, "If I had known, would have brought Banner here. He is good at dealing with such a character." "He's here? Maybe things will get worse." The man with the bow snorted in response. Aid's eyes flashed with a pale, cold light. He knew that the man had an accomplice, so he wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. He took a few steps forward in a frenzy, and with a leap, he turned into a blurry black shadow and flew out. As he closed the distance between them, he opened his fan-sized palms and slapped the man from both sides. The palms were so fast and powerful that they formed a small area of strong air pressure and whistling wind. If the palms hit, not to mention a human, even an elephant would be smashed into a pile of meat paste. Looking at Eddie's tall body getting closer and closer, the target stood straight in a military posture. His broad and perfect body and confident temperament made him look like a big white poplar tree. He wasn't fighting by himself. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, in the blink of an eye, Eddie was about to kill one of them when he heard a soft sound again. It was the special sound effect of several arrows flying through the air at high speed. No, it was not arrows. Bows and arrows were just cold weapons. However, the thing that flew towards him was clearly a grenade. Eddie had no intention of dodging. He glanced at it from the corner of his eyes and suddenly opened his mouth to bite the top of his head. With two cries of disbelief, all 3 arrows made of special materials were sucked into his mouth. After closing his mouth, Eddie's cheeks swelled up violently. However, they quickly returned to normal. He opened his mouth slightly and spat out a few rounds of smoke. If they wanted to hurt him, who was covered in poison, they could only use high-end weapons such as missiles. Low-end weapons such as guns or grenades were too weak. They could only scratch his itch. Due to the explosive arrows, Eddie only paused for a moment. Then, he continued to close in on the target. His black palms were already raised high like the deadly scythe of the Grim Reaper. "Captain!" At the critical moment, a woman's voice suddenly interrupted the battle. At the same time, a round object was thrown at the target like a dart. "You forgot to bring something." The target man's eyes lit up slightly. He reacted quickly and accurately to catch the round object. Then, he raised it with both hands. It was clearly a one-handed round shield. Under the dim light, it reflected the blue and red striped graffiti. It blocked Eddie's fierce slap from above by a hair's breadth. Boom! Facing the impact of more than 10 tons of pure strength, the target with the round shield did not fall. He knelt on one knee and supported himself on the ground. The muscles all over his body swelled up. His baseball cap was blown away by the shock wave. The strong wind blew the garbage and wallpapers around the street. Until the impact force was completely absorbed by the round shield. Huh! Eddie was surprised. He took 3 steps back and put some distance between them. The target stood up with his head held high. He held the round shield with his left hand. After losing his baseball cap, his bright blonde hair and handsome young face were exposed. Together with his golden ratio body, he was like a living statue of a soldier. Gotcha! A steel cable was thrown down from the rooftop of the building. Then, a male agent in a black uniform with black eyes and a special bow slid down. He was agile and nimble. He landed lightly on the street and stood side by side with the man with the shield. Thud! Thud! A pair of high-heeled boots stepped on the concrete floor. From the other side of the street, a beautiful woman with short dark red hair walked out. She was wearing a one-piece leather suit that revealed her curves to the fullest. She held 2 silver pistols in each of her hands and stood next to the man with the shield. The 3 of them stood together like a golden triangle. They looked at Eddie coldly and vigilantly. "Am I late, Captain?" A clear eagle whistle sounded in the night sky. A black man with a pair of mechanical wings hovered low in the air. He quickly retracted his wings and landed on the ground. He stood side by side with the man with the shield. "You're not late." The man with the shield smiled and looked at Eddie, who was alone. He said in a deep voice, "Now, it's 4 against 1. The other 3 stared at Aid in unison, as if they were going to attack him from all sides if he didn't agree with them. Eddie looked at the familiar faces in front of him and shrugged helplessly. He sighed and said, "I think this is a misunderstanding. Captain Steve, Miss Natasha. The other 2 should be Falcon and Hawkeye, the new members of the Avengers." Huh! The four people standing opposite of each other were confused. Toxin, deactivate your combat mode. As Eddie spoke, the black armor on his body melted and disintegrated, turning into black liquid that retracted back into his body. In just 3 seconds, he returned to his original appearance of a normal human youth. A temporary worker from the unnatural firm? Eddie, it's you? Steve and Natasha looked at each other. They had been to the Dehao Tower and recognized Eddie at a glance. He was the temporary worker who had served them last time, but they had never seen him in his shape-shifted form. I came to the bar with the young master to look for criminals. I misunderstood you, Captain Steve. That's why I attacked you. Eddie smiled bitterly. Steve and the others were speechless. They came here to look for criminals. When they saw Eddie attacking, they thought he was a criminal. Both sides made the same mistake. It was like a flood rushing against the Dragon King's temple. They fought for a long time, but in the end, they fought each other. Chapter 363. Wait a minute. Steve suddenly remembered something and stared straight at Eddie. His eyebrows furrowed as he said in a deep voice, "Who did you say you were accompanying?" "Family Cal's young master," Eddie replied without hesitation. Natasha nodded and muttered, "Now that you mention it, I did see you bring the young master to inspect the company in the office building of Stark Industries during the day. I heard that you even stayed in the general manager's office for half an hour. However, you left the young master alone in the bar's dance hall?" Natasha couldn't help but widen her beautiful eyes when she said this. "It seems like..." Eddie suddenly realized and turned around. Only then did he realize that catching the criminals was secondary. The main content of the mission was to protect Caesar's personal safety. At this time, if the criminals were not the two of them, then they must still be hiding in the bar. Is young Master Caesar in danger? The faces of the Avengers changed. They followed Eddie and were about to break in through the broken back door. However, in the next moment, there was a burst of dense and complicated screams from inside the dance hall. Immediately after, there was a man's scream that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. The wall of the bar's back street collapsed. Along with the explosion of rubble and dust, a middle-aged man's figure was caught in the middle. He miserably rolled in front of Eddie and the others. The middle-aged man was lying on the ground with his face facing the sky. One of his arms was exaggeratedly broken. The remaining arm was strangely flashing red and emitting white smoke. His palms seemed to have turned into an object with a temperature that exceeded 1,000 degrees. One could directly see the burning red blood vessels and muscles inside. Steve and the others were on high alert. He was in so much pain that his eyes rolled back and he fainted. The red and high temperature on his arm gradually disappeared. This is... Before the Avengers could react, there was another heavy sound from the broken back door and the outer wall of the bar. Then, a second bald man quickly flew out in the air. Without the buffer of the wall, the bald man flew through the air in a line that was as long as 10 meters. Finally, his head hit the wall of the alley opposite the bar and he died on the spot. His hands also showed signs of high temperature. His muscles and skin had disintegrated and melted. Sticky blood dripped from his dangling fingers like lava and sizzled as it corroded the cement floor. The whole process happened in 3 seconds. When Steve and the others came to their senses, the two hidden criminals were already lying on the ground, one dead and one injured. What's going on? Steve looked at the prisoners on the ground and then looked at the bar where the customers were fleeing. Even though he had a lot of combat experience, he was a little surprised and confused. The others weren't much better off than him. They all looked at the bar with a blank expression. "Don't worry." AID waved his hand calmly, sighed, and said, "If I'm not wrong, this is all done by my young master." The Avengers were in a mess. Eddie was right this time. This was all because of Caesar. If they wanted to know the cause and effect, they had to rewind the time back to 5 minutes ago. 5 minutes ago. Eddie and Steve fought because of a misunderstanding. After they left the bar from the back door, Caesar could only stay with Annie, Jane, and Lucy in the bar's ballroom. If it was any other man, it might be an extremely luxurious fortune. Unfortunately, with the current age and development of Caesar's clone, even if he had the heart, he didn't have the physical capital to do what adults like to do. Caesar was in Annie's arms. His big eyes looked around the noisy ballroom. So cute. Jane smiled brightly at Caesar. She stepped forward and wanted to touch his short blonde hair. However, she was stopped by Caesar's small hand halfway. Not to mention Thor's girlfriend, even Thor's mother didn't have the right to touch his head. Caesar thought coldly. His small face was so cold and mature that he didn't look like a baby. He controlled his strength and gently slapped Jane's hand away. Don't mind it. Annie hurriedly smoothed things over. Jane was stunned. She awkwardly retracted her hand. Lucy patted her shoulder comfortingly. Lucy looked at Caesar with her beautiful eyes. For some reason, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity from his small body. On a whim, she blinked and said, "Annie, didn't you say that his identity would scare us? Why don't you introduce him?" Well. Annie looked down at Caesar. She actually wanted to ask him what he thought about this. This made Jane and Lucy feel even more incredulous. Caesar nodded at Annie. There was nothing to hide about his identity. He was eager to let some people know about it and come all the way here just to kill them. Annie only said happily after getting permission, "His name is Caesar Carl. He's the son of the symbol of peace, Mr. Kale. He was rumored to be the best candidate for hero half a year ago, the Son of God." Mr. Kale's child? Jane and Lucy were really shocked. They almost exclaimed out loud. Jane was purely shocked. Other than shock, Lucy was also filled with joy, sadness, relief, and many other emotions. She still couldn't forget that man easily. Lucy sighed in her heart. She looked at Caesar with scorching love and tenderness. Caesar was experienced. Naturally, he knew what she was thinking. He purposely turned his face away and looked at the people who were dancing to the song. At this moment, two men were talking and laughing. They walked towards them intentionally or unintentionally. Their eyes wandered around the graceful bodies of Annie and the other two girls. Their deep-set eyes revealed a beast-like desire from time to time. Annie and Jane were still chatting. Apparently, they didn't notice the approaching danger from the side. Caesar frowned slightly. He closed his eyes and quickly opened them again. A white light flashed in his eyes, and the scene in his vision changed drastically again. He looked at Jane and Lucy who were opposite him. His gaze directly penetrated their dresses and underwear and saw their naked bodies. This was just the beginning. Soon, his gaze went deeper. The medical equipment clearly penetrated the human skeleton, the internal organs, and the dense blood vessels. Caesar was shocked. In his eyes, Jane and Lucy had turned into two moving skeletons. The heart in the left chest was still beating in the skeleton. It was a hair-raising sight. This was the Kryptonian's eyes. In addition to telescopic and microscopic vision, this was the third manifestation of the superpower, X-ray. Caesar glanced sideways and saw that the two men with bad intentions had also turned into two skeletons. However, unlike ordinary people, their internal organs were like flames. Their biological energy was trying to suppress the burning flames. These two were the criminals who attacked Stark's employees. "Who is Eddie chasing?" Caesar whispered helplessly. Seeing the two criminals approaching, he immediately patted Annie's arm. Annie subconsciously let go of her hands. In less than 0.1 seconds, Caesar disappeared from her arms. A few meters was nothing to Caesar. It was like teleportation. Caesar appeared above the two criminals in the blink of an eye. The two criminals were shocked. Their reaction was faster than ordinary people. They raised their arms to attack or defend. Their palms glowed with a scorching red temperature as if some kind of switch had been turned on. The temperature rose sharply, and the ballroom in the bar suddenly became hot. Chapter 364. Caesar narrowed his eyes as he watched the two criminals reach out to grab him. The two pairs of hands quickly heated up, and the temperature instantly exceeded 100 degrees Celsius. It continued to rise until it was close to 1000 degrees Celsius, which was unbearable for human bodies. In his superhuman eyes and senses, the flow of time in the world was slowing down. Annie and the other two girls were panicking behind him. The surrounding customers were screaming and trying to escape the scene. There were also the two criminals who were both terrified and angry. Everything in the ballroom slowed down slightly. That was not all. Caesar could also see that the blood in the two criminals' bodies was rapidly evaporating. Under the guidance of some modified genes, the biological energy was converted into a scorching energy source that was transmitted from their muscles and bones to their arms. Modified humans, huh? Interesting. Caesar blinked as he slowly reached out his small, fair hands towards the two pairs of scorching red palms. Pa! Pa! The flow of time returned to normal. Caesar, who was floating in the air, used one of his small hands to block the two criminals' close combat attacks. The size of his small hands was completely disproportionate to the size of his big hands. Even so, Caesar was still able to easily block the two burly men's attacks. "You're asking for it." The two criminals were not shocked. Instead, they were overjoyed. Their faces were red as they held on to Caesar's small hands. They were still trying to restrain their energy. Soon, their entire arms were as red as fire, and their sleeves had long been burned to ashes. They wanted to melt Caesar's hands with high temperature. The temperature was high, and the heat waves were rolling. The customers in the bar and dance hall had never seen such a battle before. They screamed and retreated, leaving an empty space for the three of them. Only Annie and the other two girls were still standing at the edge of the space, looking at Caesar in the battle anxiously. Compared to everyone else on the scene, Caesar, who was fighting 1 against 2, was unperturbed. His small face was as cold as before, and his small hands, which were as slender as lotus roots, were tightly held by the burning palms of the two criminals. Caesar did not use any strength. He quietly floated in the air and looked at the criminals who were trying to restrain their energy. He looked at them as if they were idiots. Why is it not working? The bald man among them was shocked. The temperature had reached the critical point of their production, 1500 degrees Celsius. Even steel should have melted by now. But the small hand that was fighting with the criminal's palms was still cold and showed no signs of damage. Was he still a human? The bald man looked up at Caesar, who was smiling. His body was hot, but his back was cold. He could not speak at all. Of course, he did not know. Kryptonians' bodies of steel, even solar energy, were used as nutrients for their food. Their skin was resistant to extremely high and low temperatures. Not to mention that the temperature was less than 2000 degrees Celsius. "I can't hold on any longer," another man wailed loudly. After the temperature rose to 1500 degrees Celsius, his genetically modified palm could no longer hold on. It could no longer control the temperature, and his body began to disintegrate and fester. Caesar could not help but shake his head. He had let the criminals show the power of the high temperature in order to test the biological modification technology that the terrorist organization had mastered. From the looks of it now, this biotechnology that allowed a human to possess the superpower to convert high-temperature energy into energy was not perfect. Once it went out of control, even the human body would be devoured by the high temperature of the conversion and disintegrate, or even face the consequences of self-destruction. The explosion that attacked the Stark Industries employees should have been caused by the previous biologically modified humans who could not control their superpower and self-destructed. Their palms were as red as iron that had been forged by fire. The two criminals groaned in pain and wanted to retract their hands. But no matter how hard they tried, they could not pull their hands away. They stared at Caesar with their eyes wide open in horror. "Have you had enough fun? It's time for me to do something," Caesar said as he exerted force with his left hand. With a cracking sound, one of the criminal's arms was broken at a 180-degree angle. The criminal immediately screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Caesar thought it was too noisy, so he pushed him to the side of the inner wall. He used a little more force, so the criminal crashed through the wall and rolled out to the street outside. "You can go with him." Caesar looked at the bald man and kicked forward with his small foot. The bald man turned into a ball and flew out in the same direction with a whistling sound. That was the reason why the Avengers saw the two criminals fall to the ground. And this was just the tip of the iceberg of the Kryptonian clone's strength. Facing the waves of dust that had not completely settled, Caesar flew out of the collapsed wall. He was surprised to find Eddie and Steve. He said in surprise, "You guys are fighting aliens together?" Captain America, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Falcon were the main fighting force of the Avengers on Earth since Kale and Iron Man Tawny left Earth. Hulk was a double-edged sword, and he should not be released unless it was the end of the world. Natasha looked at Caesar, her beautiful eyes full of disbelief. She whispered, "It's really young Master Caesar. Not only is he so powerful, but he can also fly. Is this thanks to Master Kale's powerful bloodline?" Steve and the others were silent. It was rare for them to go all out, but they were defeated by a junior. It was too embarrassing for the superheroes. "Young Master, did you do this?" Eddie pointed to the dead and injured criminal on the ground. "Of course. I don't know where you went, but they insisted on coming, so I had to take care of them." Caesar spread his hands and looked at the corpse of the bald man whose head was stuck in the wall. He frowned and said to himself, "Huh? One of them is dead? I only kicked him lightly. He really can't take it." Eddie's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He felt injustice for the two criminals. Kicked him lightly? This person had already flown more than 10 meters. It was pure luck that one of them didn't die. Caesar floated in front of everyone and introduced himself. "Hello heroes, nice to meet you. I'm the son of the symbol of peace, Caesar Karl." Natasha smiled and said, "Young Master, many of us have seen you a long time ago. It's just that you were still asleep at that time, and your body was only a little bigger than a palm." Steve put the round shield back on his back and pretended to be serious as he said slowly, "Your father and I are comrades who have gone through fire and water together. You can just call me Captain or Uncle in the future." "Yes, Captain." Caesar laughed in his heart. He pointed at the criminals on the ground and asked directly, "Did you go out for them tonight?" "That's right." Steve nodded. Seeing that there were no outsiders around, he explained, "We found some clues and locked onto these two people. Because we know that they have special abilities, almost all of the Avengers were dispatched to avoid hurting innocent civilians." "Very good." Caesar sighed in relief. He thought that after the main body and Tawny left, there was no one to protect Stark Industries. Now, it was obvious that the Avengers and SHELD had not been fully mobilized. Thinking of this, Caesar said innocently, "Captain, I'll leave the injured one to you. I'll leave the injured criminal to you. I believe that with your methods, you'll be able to obtain more information from him or his mouth. I'm afraid that I won't control my strength properly and kill him." When the heroes heard this, they trembled. They looked at Caesar as if they were looking at a little demon with wings and horns. Chapter 365. The Avengers did not waste their efforts to capture a criminal related to the attack. Steve took the unconscious and seriously injured criminal, and while the city was dark and the police had not arrived, he quickly led the heroes out of the bar area. Before leaving, Steve told Caesar, "Although your father isn't here, you can't be careless in your learning and training of combat skills. Next time, come to SHELD headquarters training ground. I'll be your combat coach and sparring partner." Captain America as a sparring partner? If it were anyone else, they might be terrified, but Caesar was not an ordinary person. His big eyes lit up slightly, and he agreed without hesitation. He was still unable to perfectly control the strength of his superhuman body. If Captain America could be his sparring partner, it would be the best. After all, where could he find a human sandbag who was proficient in dozens of close-range combat techniques and had a lot of HP and flesh and would not die easily? Eddie had completely entered the role of butler and subordinate. His human body was too weak, and his poison was too strong. He was not a suitable sparring partner. After the members of the Avengers left, Caesar told Annie and the other two girls to quickly go home. He then left Queens with Eddie. That night, Caesar's strength was displayed. He cleanly subdued 2 genetically modified humans, causing many people to be unable to sleep. It was unknown if others were able to sleep, but Caesar's doppelganger was sleeping very soundly. Due to running around for half a day, using energy to fly at the speed of sound, and fighting supernatural beings, his small body was so tired that he fell asleep as soon as he laid on the soft bed. It was noon the next day when Caesar woke up. He got up and flew to the bathroom. When he asked Eddie to prepare lunch, Eddie reported 2 things to him with a serious face. First, late last night, the Avengers, led by Captain Steve, were on their way back to SHELD, with genetically modified criminals. They were attacked by a group of terrorists on their way back. If it was an ordinary terrorist, a hero would have been able to annihilate them. However, the other party was an elite armed team made up of genetically modified humans. They had the advantage in numbers, and the incident happened suddenly. The Avengers could only passively defend against the attack. The terrorists were clearly well-trained and under unified command. They only interfered slightly and retreated after one attack. When Steve and the others wanted to counterattack, the terrorists paid the price of 2 of their companions' self-destruction. They took advantage of the chaos and escaped into the dark night of the bustling city. Throughout the entire process, none of the Avengers were injured. However, the criminals' hostages were killed by the terrorists. Caesar was also very surprised when he heard this. They actually dared to attack the Avengers in downtown New York. This was too bold. More importantly, their goal was obviously perfectly achieved. Although the Avengers were still in the new stage, and Kale had left Earth with Tawny. The main internal heroes, such as Captain America, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and others, were all mid-level combat power between mortals and superhumans. However, not treating heroes as humans was too arrogant and overbearing. Second, it was news about Stark Industries. It was sent by Annie. It also happened late last night. General Manager Pepper Potts mysteriously disappeared. Deputy General Manager Aldrich Killian also disappeared. The disappearance of 2 important executives of Stark Industries made everyone in Stark Industries panic. Today, Stark Industries shares fell by more than $10 billion when it was published in the newspaper. Although it fell by $10 billion, Stark Industries was still firmly sitting on the top 500 in the world. However, since Iron Man Tawny left, this was the first time Stark Industries had fallen below the trough record. Both of these were bad news that couldn't be any worse. After listening to Eddie's story, Caesar calmly thought about it. It seemed like 2 different things, but in fact, the 2 were inextricably linked. It could almost be concluded that they were the same thing. If all his guesses were correct, the leader of the terrorists and the inventor of biological genetic modification was Deputy General Manager Killian. Then he really was a formidable villain worthy of praise. Last night. The criminals had just been captured by the Avengers and realized that their identities might be exposed. They simply ordered their underlings to kill the hostages while they gave up their identity and status. They decisively took Pepper Potts captive and took her away. Ruthless and merciless, swift and decisive. They didn't drag their feet or talk nonsense. This was the good cultivation that villains should have. When things reached this point, Caesar wanted to give Killian a thumbs up. However, that was in front of the other party's 3-meter-tall grave. Eddie looked at Caesar and said, "Young master, we should ask Family Cal for help, right? If Boss Yutong makes a move, I believe that all problems can be solved." The Black Empress Yutong, the queen of the underground world. This was no joke. It was a name that was irrigated by the accumulation of bones and blood. Caesar shook his little head and sneered disdainfully, "This is a small matter. There's no need to trouble Yutong. That's your mother." Eddie secretly cursed, but didn't dare to say it out loud. He helplessly asked, "Then what should we do?" "What should we do?" "The Avengers and Stark Industries territory must be recovered, and it must be fast. Strong." Caesar's little face was cold. After thinking for a while, he thought of a countermeasure and said, "Eddie, there are a few things that I need to trouble you to do." "Please speak." Eddie simply nodded. Caesar's tone was still childish, but there was no doubt in his words. "First of all, I have a plan. First, get in touch with the Dehao building and say that they don't need to do anything about Stark Industries. Just let Yutong borrow the Lord God." "Lord God? What's that?" Eddie scratched his head in surprise. In the unnatural firm, he had never heard of the strange name of Lord God. "Pass it on. Yutong will understand." Caesar shrugged and continued to say with narrowed eyes, "Second, inform the management of Stark Industries and have them prepare the venue and publicity for the press conference. Announce to the media that the higher-ups of Stark Industries will hold a press conference to the world." "Press conference? And it's the higher-ups of Stark Industries?" Eddie's eyes widened. With a confused expression, he tried to ask, "Who?" Caesar's face was indifferent as he pointed at his own nose. This seemed to have touched Eddie's funny bone, causing him to laugh exaggeratedly. After a while, Eddie looked at Caesar's serious little face. The smile on his face froze, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. "Young master, what you said can't be true, right? You're going to hold a press conference?" "Nonsense." Caesar crossed his arms and looked at him from the corner of his eyes. He retorted, "Is my identity not enough to represent the higher-ups of Stark Industries?" Chapter 366. Stark Industries is holding a press conference, and a mysterious senior executive will be attending in person. This important news was officially announced by Stark Industries, and it spread like wildfire. In less than an hour, almost all the local government agencies, corporate organizations, and media units in New York knew about it. Stark Industries' press conference, according to past practice, was a headline with gold content, especially at this special moment. The major shareholder, Mr. Kale, and the chairman, Mr. Tani, were not there. The general manager, Miss Potts, and the deputy manager, Mr. Killian, were missing. Outside, Stark Industries was besieged by a group of large companies in the same industry. Inside, Stark Industries employees were constantly attacked by terrorists. It could be said that Stark Industries had reached its most difficult low point. At this time, a senior executive suddenly stood up and wanted to hold a press conference to the world. This was undoubtedly like throwing a high-explosive grenade into a pool of water, triggering a terrifying wave. Whether it was the industry insiders or ordinary citizens outside the industry, they all had an unprecedented interest in discussing it. The venue of the press conference was the World's Fair in New York, which had been established early by Mr. Howard during World War II. Mr. Tani had repeatedly improved and transformed it according to the trend of the times. It was usually used as a museum to exhibit the products invented by Stark Industries. It was also a place for members of the Stark family to announce new industrial research and development products, product concepts, and major decisions about the future of the industry. Stark Industries' first epic business card to the world. Holding a press conference at the World's Fair was really extraordinary. Since its construction, only Howard and Tawny had the qualifications and authority to use the venue. The current branch manager, Killian, had wanted to use the venue many times, but the proposal was directly rejected by Potts. Could it be that Iron Man Stark is back? Many media people had this speculation in their minds, and they excitedly swarmed to the World's Fair. The press conference was scheduled to be held at 12:00 in the morning, and access was restricted. However, at around 11:30, the World Expo Hall's podium was already packed with reporters and industry insiders. They were whispering to each other, and there were cameras and microphones set up everywhere like guns and cannons. The World's Fair's security guards and the New York police did the security work inside and outside to ensure that the press conference could be held normally. Time passed by. In the past, there would be performances such as beautiful women dancing as the opening to warm up the atmosphere. However, this time was not like the past. During this time, there was not even a host on stage. There was only dim light on the podium, and there was not even half a shadow. The hundreds of media people in the audience could only stare at the empty podium until 12:00 sharp. Just when they mistakenly thought that this was just a cover, a few beams of spotlight lit up and shone on the corner of the stage. There, a small figure was finally exposed. Everyone held their breaths and widened their eyes. They saw that it was a little boy of about 1 year old. His short blonde hair was bright and shiny, and his pair of big amber eyes were very beautiful. The facial features on his white and tender little face were exquisite and impeccable. His body was less than half a meter tall, and he was wearing a tailor-made super small suit. Due to his overly mature aura, there was no sense of disharmony when matched with his small body. The little boy had a lollipop in his mouth. His cute face was cold, and his short legs moved slowly. He walked from the corner of the large modern glass platform to the podium on stage. The whole venue was silent. Some people were still looking back, thinking that there would be other people on stage. However, after looking for a long time, no one followed except for the little boy. Under everyone's gaze, the little boy walked close to the podium, but because of his height, his body was completely blocked by the podium as soon as he got close. Is he going to perform? Seeing this funny scene, the people in the audience finally couldn't help but burst into laughter. But the next moment, the little boy ignored gravity, flew up, and stood steadily on the podium. This made the eyes of the people in the audience widen in horror, and the laughter also stopped abruptly. "Good morning, everyone." The little boy smiled faintly and didn't have stage fright. He calmly said to the microphone in a childish voice, "Are you very disappointed? I am the senior director of Stark, who held this press conference." The people in the audience were even more shocked. They had seen a 100-year-old veteran of World War II, but they had never heard of a 1-year-old senior director of a company. The boy shrugged and said straightforwardly, "Let me introduce myself first. My name is Caesar Carl." Caesar Carl. This name made the audience silent for a while, and then it triggered an uproar like a nuclear explosion. Almost everyone stood up excitedly, and the flashes of the cameras kept flashing one after another. Caesar Carl. This name had caused many heated discussions in society half a year ago. Although it had been quiet for half a year, it was still difficult for people to forget it until now. The descendant of the symbol of peace. The successor of the shares of Stark Industries. The Son of God who had been at the top of the earth since he was born. This was the first time the Son of God had appeared in public. How could people not be excited and look forward to it? They hoped that he could create all kinds of legends like Mr. Kale. "It seems that you all know my identity. That's easy. Caesar smiled and looked down at the crowd below. He said with a cold face, "This press conference is to use the current platform to express a few wishes from my personal standpoint." Some media personnel were very conscious. They simply adjusted the channel and broadcast the press conference live. Caesar said confidently, "From now on, I will officially take over Mr. Tani's heavy responsibility and continue to develop new technological products. Later, I will release a new product concept that transcends the era. It is estimated that it will be mass-produced and sold to the world soon." To take over the work of the genius engineer Tani, there was probably no one in the world who could guarantee that they could do it. But at this time, when the Son of God Caesar said it, it made people feel an indescribable persuasiveness. This was probably also from the strong influence of the symbol of peace. In addition, I am here to publicly declare war on the terrorists who have been targeting Stark Industries and my friends recently. Caesar was young but domineering. He said faintly, "I only have 2 people here. You can do whatever you want. During this period, I will not borrow the power of the alliance, family, or military. If you can't kill me within a week, then I will uproot you from this blue planet." The clones' counterattack had officially begun. Chapter 367. Son of God, Caesar, makes his debut in front of the world and the public. Shouldering the heavy responsibility of Stark Industries, is it a step into the abyss or a new legend? Son of God, Caesar, who is less than 1 year old, publicly declared war on terrorists alone. Caesar, within 3 days, the new century's product will be announced to the public. Less than half a day after the press conference ended, the news report with the above text as the top headline and Caesar standing on the podium as the cover had already been widely spread by the 21st century's new online media and additional issues of newspapers and magazines. This undoubtedly set off an epic-level frenzy, triggering an unprecedented heated discussion among the people. Naturally, there were many voices of doubt. After all, Caesar was just a child. However, the voices of support occupied the majority. Those who supported Caesar were basically Caesar's former fans. The saying of "love me, love my dog" continued to extend to Caesar. They hoped that Caesar could continue to create heroic miracles and legends, because the world needed heroes too much. Someone commented, "Regardless of whether Caesar's new product can get Stark Industries out of its commercial predicament, and regardless of whether Caesar can eliminate the terrorists who threaten New York's public security within a week, from the moment he, a 1-year-old child, chose to stand on the podium and shoulder the heavy responsibility without a change in his expression, publicly declaring war, he has already won spiritually." These words triggered the resonance and expectations of thousands of people. At this moment, Stark Industries, near the top of the main office building, the former chairman of Tony Stark's office cum studio. Caesar's small body was lying on the leather sofa, with a lollipop in his mouth, controlling the chair to spin in circles. Eddie, who had changed into a suit, stood in the office hall, looking at Caesar and sighing. "Young master, to be honest, my original expectations were already crazy enough, but I didn't expect that what you did was dozens of times crazier than I expected. I'll just have an alien symbiotic freak freeloading on me. I can occasionally scare and kill people, but I can't turn into Iron Man announcing the product and publicly declaring war. Is this something that the 2 of us can accomplish?" When Eddie said this, he fidgeted with his hands and kept rubbing his hair. Poison stretched out its tentacles in dissatisfaction and slapped his face, forcing him to calm down a little. Caesar crossed his arms and snorted, "Who asked Tani not to be here? You can only rely on us to do this." Logically speaking, Tani should have been the one to solve the problem. However, Tani and his original body had gone to the Milky Way Alliance. He, the Godfather, would have to take the blame for Tani. Eddie looked at Caesar and asked in surprise, "Why don't we act in secret?" He also deceived Potts, who was Tani's girlfriend and secretary, into trusting him. He cultivated underground terrorist forces and gradually carried out his revenge plan. But because the Avengers moved too quickly, Killian was worried that it would be dangerous to continue staying in Stark Industries, so he decisively kidnapped Potts and hid back in his base. I understand. Eddie recalled what Caesar had said before. Combining it with his current judgment, he said thoughtfully, "Young master. You called a press conference to announce a new product, but in fact, you want to erase the negative status of Stark Industries. This way, the enemy's plot to destroy Stark Industries won't succeed. I'll give them a deadline to publicly declare war. In essence, it'll be a mockery, and they'll be even more anxious to get rid of me." Caesar smiled and pointed at his own nose. Now, Potts and Stark Industries are no longer their number one target. I, who plays an important role in Stark Industries, am their number one target. I can't believe you can still smile. Eddie looked out the window vigilantly, feeling that the terrorists would attack them at any time. Caesar's lips curled into a sneer, just like a little devil. He said in a childish voice full of murderous intent, "What are you afraid of? I can't wait for them to come to me. If one comes, I'll kill one. If two come, I'll kill two. It's best if all of them come together. I can't be bothered to move a few more times if they get wiped out in one go." Eddie's scalp went numb. He shrunk his neck and threw out his last question. "Young master, the premise for you to help Stark Industries rise is that the new product released is recognized by the public. If the new product is fake, then everything you said before is not valid. Who told you that the product released is fake? It's just that we haven't started making it yet." After Caesar finished speaking, under Eddie's puzzled gaze, he looked at the computer screen on the desk and asked, "Main God, are you ready?" The computer screen suddenly flashed, and the code blocks were pieced together into a ball of data. Then, a cold voice came from the speaker. "The artificial intelligence Main God is at your service." Chapter 368. In the field of manufacturing technological products, Caesar would not be able to reach the level of Iron Man Tony Stark by himself, even if his intelligence growth was much higher than the average humans. Tony's almost off-the-charts creative mind and engineering ability was already considered a superpower of a technological branch, and it was a special superpower that could not be copied by the card draw system. However, this did not mean that Caesar could not take over the heavy burden of Stark Industries' technological research and development. He had Lord God, an artificial intelligence that far surpassed the world's technological standards, and he controlled all the top manufacturing factories and resources of Stark Industries and Family Cal. Plus, he had a unique way of thinking from another Earth in his previous life. Caesar only needed to provide the complete product requirements and ideas, and the rest of the theories and research would be left to Lord God to calculate and speculate. Then, it would be left to Stark Industries' research and manufacturing team and workers to perfect the manufacturing. At this time, in Tawny's private office, Caesar was equivalent to the commander-in-chief. He sat on the office desk with computers on and under the desk. The main computer fan and water cooler were trying their best to lower the temperature, and several monitors were lit up with blue screens showing Lord God's unique blue ball logo. The door opened, and Eddie stepped in. He wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve and reported to Caesar while panting, "There should be no problem. The 3 supercomputers in Stark Industries Technology Park are all turned on, and with the 2 from Family Cal, there are a total of 5 supercomputers on standby." Caesar nodded and ordered one of the monitors, "Lord God, let's check it first." "Yes." Lord God responded through the speaker, and a series of data codes flashed across several monitors. After a while, a beeping sound was heard. 5 supercomputers have been successfully connected. You can use their performance and storage to calculate and process data at any time. Very good. Caesar snapped his fingers. Eddie beside him asked in confusion, "Is it necessary to use 5 supercomputers at once? Are you trying to invade a large country's military database?" "Stop joking. The Lord of Gods doesn't need 2 supercomputers for a military database. Caesar rubbed his hands in annoyance, looking like he was eager to go all out. He smiled meaningfully and said, "I'm afraid that 5 supercomputers are not enough for what we're going to do next. Then I'll wait and see." Eddie pursed his lips and sat down on a chair. He wanted to see what the little demon Caesar was trying to figure out. Since everything was ready, Caesar didn't dawdle and said directly, "First of all, I'll give you a piece of my mind. Main God, I need to set up a secret database that no one can hack or delete, including Vice and Jarvis." The Lord God didn't even need to use the supercomputer and instantly gave a response plan. "It has been solved. The database will be set up in the supercomputer equipment room of the main base. I will set up a firewall and guard it online. No one will have the authority to invade it." "Wait, I'm not done yet." Caesar held the stick of the lollipop and tapped it in the air. He said seriously, beyond his age, the storage capacity of the database must be large enough. "How large? Please give me an example," the Lord God said coldly, unwilling to admit defeat. Caesar was very straightforward and threw out a shocking condition. It must be able to store the data storage of everything within 10 Earths. "Young master, what are you trying to do?" Eddie was a little dumbfounded. The Lord God didn't expect it either. The image on the screen froze for a moment. Caesar blinked and said, "It's nothing. It's a super large virtual world. If it's realistic enough, the storage capacity must be large enough." He looked at the screen and asked, "Why, you can't do it?" The Lord God didn't answer. After more than 10 seconds of silence, the speaker spoke again. "It has been solved. The storage will be set up in the main base and equipped with a compressed memory chip. It is estimated that it can store the data of everything within 12 Earths. From now on, let K2 modify the main base. It will only take 19 hours. Not bad." Caesar praised him lightly. It was impossible for him to use theory and the current level of technology to research and conquer it. However, the Lord God of artificial intelligence was different. He had the theoretical level of technology from Earth, Wakanda, and planet Sokka. As long as the condition did not exceed a certain level of difficulty, the Lord God could try to calculate and conquer it. Caesar didn't stand on ceremony and made his request according to his idea. "I want a super strong network signal that can cover at least one large city." After half a minute of calculation, the Lord God replied coldly, "It has been solved. Build an alien signal tower in Stark Industries. The network signal will be enough to cover the entire city. The upload speed can reach up to 100 G per second. From now on, it will take 3 days with the manpower of Stark Industries." Caesar thought for a moment and continued, "In addition, there's another thing. Also, build a super large virtual world framework in the database. First, divide it into a few areas to meet the basic system framework that is detached from reality and game fantasy." Caesar talked about this for a long time, including some areas and design ideas of the virtual space. He mainly talked about the effect that he wanted to achieve and left the specific theory and reality to the Lord God to calculate and judge. Not long after, the Lord God analyzed in a very reliable manner. "According to your request, every time we build a perfect, detailed, and realistic virtual world framework, we need 5 supercomputers to calculate and code for 3 days. Take your time, there's no rush." Caesar smiled and comforted the Lord God. Eddie had been confused since just now, but when he heard this, he finally understood. He said in surprise, "Young master, your so-called new scientific research product to save Stark Industries is a game? A virtual reality game?" It was the year 2009 of the 21st century. With the popularity of computers, mobile phones, and other electronic products, video games were indeed very popular. However, Stark Industries was going to develop games? No matter what, this was too low class. After all, Stark Industries was the leader of the technology and weapons industry. Sensing Eddie's doubt, Caesar was not angry. He said confidently, "What do you know? What I want to create is not just a game, but a world." A world? Eddie muttered to himself. He did not understand at that moment. Caesar did not explain further. He said seriously to the Lord God, "Lord God, there's one last technical problem that must be solved. I need to build a device, preferably similar to the model and size of a helmet. It can allow humans to use it as a medium to connect their 5 senses and sensory centers to the virtual space that we create." Eddie was stunned. Connecting everything that happened before, he suddenly realized that an incredible high-tech product was about to be born. The studio was silent. The Lord God did not reply immediately, but data codes kept flashing on the screen. If one was in the supercomputer equipment room, they would definitely see countless chips and hardware heating up rapidly. The water cooling equipment was operating crazily, and a huge data flood was surging on the cable network. After a long time, the Lord God replied, "It's solved. The equipment development is tentatively set as holographic VR helmet technology." Chapter 369. 3 days later. Nearly half a week had passed since Caesar's press conference, and there were only 4 days left before the 1-week deadline that he had previously mentioned. During this time, the city of New York was calm. The terrorists were not in a hurry to attack Caesar, and Caesar did not announce the positioning and concept of the new product. Both sides seemed to be in a standoff and remained silent. The employees of Stark Industries were working overtime these days, as if they were busy researching and developing something. A 30-meter-high iron tower was also built in the inner area of the industry. The specific purpose was unknown. The media wanted to interview some senior personnel, but the senior personnel refused to disclose it on the grounds of confidentiality agreements. Everything fell into the calm before the storm. Due to the appearance of Caesar, the Son of God, Stark Industries stopped the downward trend of collapse. The stock even showed signs of rising, but this was because most people maintained a high level of expectation. Everyone wanted to know if Caesar could replace Iron Man Tawny and continue to develop fascinating black technology products. Perhaps even the terrorists hiding in the dark were also watching. At this time, north of the United States, Tennessee. Snowflakes as big as goose feathers fell from a height of 10,000 meters with the wind. The city was covered with a layer of thick silver clothes. The fierce cold wind passed through the streets and alleys, making an extremely mournful wailing sound. Located in a luxurious duplex villa on the outskirts of the city, there were armed bodyguards wearing sunglasses both inside and outside the house. A man and a woman were confronting each other in the hall on the first floor where the heater was burning vigorously. The man in a suit and leather shoes was sitting on a leather chair with his legs crossed. He was about 40 years old, with slight wrinkles left by the passage of time on his face. His dark blonde hair was combed back and shiny, and there was a gentle and elegant faint confident smile on his face. About 3 meters across from him, Potts was also sitting on a chair. Her beautiful eyes were fiercely looking at the man in the suit, and her delicate face was full of disgust. The middle-aged man waved his hand, and a blonde beauty immediately came forward to serve him wine. He took a sip of the red wine and said to Potts, "Miss Potts, you don't have to look at me like this. I don't want to hurt you. Maybe we can sit at the table and have a pleasant conversation while drinking wine like before." "Oh, Killian, don't pretend to be a gentleman since you've already resorted to these dirty tricks." Potts raised his hands expressionlessly. His fair wrists were shackled and tied to the chair he was sitting on. Killian showed a shocked expression and shouted at the bodyguards beside him, What did you do to the respected Miss Potts? Hurry up and get rid of the chains. There's no need to put on an act." Seeing the bodyguard step forward, Potts coldly glanced at them. Then, he looked at Killian and said calmly, "What do you want to achieve by attacking me and Stark Industries? What purpose?" Of course, it's to personally destroy everything that Tony Stark owns. Speaking of Tony, Gillian finally took off his usual gentlemanly mask. His face was slightly twisted as he said sternly, "Isn't he very arrogant, conceited, and supercilious? I'd like to see what kind of expression he will have when he loses everything." "What you're doing is a crime," Potts responded mercilessly. Killian opened his hands and said matter-of-factly, "So what if it's a crime? As long as you have the strength, you can be above the law. This is what the group of characters called superheroes told me. Unfortunately, you'll never become a superhero." Potts chuckled and looked at Killian with contempt. "Even if a 1-year-old child can become a superhero, you'll never have that chance. Using the ultimate biological project, I can master extraordinary powers and create a powerful force. I don't need anyone's recognition," Killian retorted coldly. Gillian retorted coldly. He put down the goblet and narrowed his eyes dangerously. "I know that the appearance of the so-called Son of God, Caesar, has ignited a glimmer of hope in your heart and made Stark Industries seem to have a firm foothold. But without a real product release, Stark Industries will always be on the edge of a cliff. You don't think that a 1-year-old child can really replace Tony Stark, do you?" Potts lowered his head and didn't speak. After following Tony for so long, he had seen countless geniuses and scientists. But he really couldn't find anyone who could compete with Tony in the field of science and technology manufacturing. Dr. Bana could be considered half a genius, but he was a scientist in the field of biology, boss. Something bad has happened. At this moment, a bodyguard pushed the door open and rushed into the hall, causing Killian, who had just drunk a mouthful of red wine, to choke. "What's the matter? Why are you shouting?" Killian took out a towel and wiped his mouth, glaring at the bodyguard. The bodyguard didn't care about being scolded and quickly reported, "Boss, Stark Industries really released a new product. Just 5 minutes ago, it was pre-sold on the official website." "What did you say?" Killian's eyes widened in shock. He didn't have the mood to pay attention to Potts anymore. He jumped up from the chair, grabbed the bodyguard's hand, and hurriedly said, "Let's go, take me to see it." The bodyguard immediately took Killian to the basement. As soon as they entered the room, Killian waved his hand and shooed away the researchers on the computer chair. He sat down and operated the mouse to open the official website of Stark Industries. As soon as he entered the official website, he saw a colorful layout that occupied the entire computer screen. It was really the promotion and introduction of the new product. The titles that greeted his eyes were simple and crude: frowny face social games, virtual reality, Skynet. Although this is a game, it's not a joke. Game? Stark Industries has been reduced to making games? Sure enough, it's a boring child's trick. Killian smiled and scrolled down with the mouse to continue browsing the content of the introduction below. In the middle, there was a paragraph of questions that stunned Killian. He couldn't help but read it softly. "Are you disappointed with reality and want to have a new life experience? Are you not willing to be mediocre and want to become a star in the eyes of millions? Are you imprisoned by your environment and want to experience the fantasy world and the universe as you wish? In Skynet, you can get everything and start a new game life with equality and freedom." It had to be said that Killian was a little tempted by these questions. However, following the enemy's position, he snorted and said, "No matter how well you say it, it's not just a game." Scrolling down the page, there was a short video about a product introduction. Killian clicked to play it. A three-dimensional product model in the style of a technological helmet appeared in the video. It rotated 360 degrees and was accompanied by a cold mechanical voice explanation. "On this day in 2009, Stark Industries made a breakthrough in the human body, information, and other advanced technology. They created a holographic VR helmet that can transmit the 5 senses of the human body and simulate hormones. Through this holographic VR helmet, players can go online and connect to the virtual world, Skynet. They can break free from the human body and arrive in a new world to experience virtual world, is this really just a game? Killian's hands trembled slightly. He had a bad feeling in his heart. He scrolled down to the bottom of the page. It was about the pre-sale of the holographic VR helmet. The pre-sale price was $5,000. This price, in the current era, was enough to buy a good car. Furthermore, Skynet was only available to the New York City area for the time being. However, the number of pre-sales of the holographic VR helmet had exceeded 100,000 people in less than 10 minutes after it was released. The number was still increasing rapidly. Chapter 370. On the outskirts of New York, in a retro villa hidden in a birch forest. Creak, two bodyguards wearing sunglasses pushed open the door and entered, holding two well-packaged, square boxes in their hands. The cover had the manufacturing logo of Stark Industries and a series of small printed explanations in English. As soon as they walked into the hall and took off their coats, one of them rushed to Jillian, who was sitting in the hall, and reported loudly, "Boss, we finally bought it back. We got 2 in total. What took you so long? It's been almost half a day." Jillian's face was gloomy and uncertain. He looked at the two of them coldly, and his gaze subconsciously shifted to the product's outer packaging. "Sigh, don't mention it." The leading bodyguard sighed, wiped the hot sweat on his forehead, and put the box on the table. He explained with grievance, "Boss, you didn't go to the downtown area of New York, especially the main road to Stark Industries. Pedestrians and vehicles almost jammed the streets and roads, and people fanatically lined up for thousands of meters like crazy just to buy this holographic VR helmet." The other bodyguard seconded, "Yes, we got these 2 things, plus $2,000, from a scalper. I heard that not only in New York, but also in nearby cities and other countries, many people came to New York specifically to try this Skynet game, which is known as the cross-century platform. The whole of New York is boiling. If you go out now, no matter who it is, they are talking about Skynet and holographic VR." The two bodyguards talked to each other, and their words were full of curiosity and excitement. The more they talked, the more excited they became. When they noticed that Jillian's face next to them was getting more and more ugly, they tactfully shut their mouths. "Correct your attitude. I don't believe that a mere kid, in 3 or 4 days, can make a cross-era technology product from nothing, and directly put it into mass production and sale operation." Jillian reprimanded them, pointed to a box, and motioned to a bodyguard, "You, take it to the research room in the basement and let the staff disassemble and scan it." "Disassemble?" The bodyguard heard this, and his tone was full of reluctance and regret. "What, do you still want to play?" Jillian raised his head, his anger on the verge of exploding. I'll go right now." The bodyguard shivered, picked up a box with both hands, and ran to the basement. Only then did Jillian's expression soften a little. Looking at the boxes on the table, he raised his chin and ordered the remaining bodyguard, "Open them." "Okay, boss." The bodyguard moved quickly. He took out a folding knife from his trouser pocket and tore open the box, revealing a black gold helmet-like object. The holographic VR helmet was made of aluminum and tempered glass. It was a semicircular arc that looked like an assembly line with a strong sense of craftsmanship. It looked very high-tech and fashionable, and it shone with a faint cool light under the light. No matter how demanding Jillian was, he could not help but secretly praise it. At the very least, from the looks of it, it seemed to be worth the money. "How do I operate it? Do I just have to put it on?" Jillian asked. The bodyguard held the instruction manual in his hand and said while reading, "Boss, it's written here. Currently, Skynet only covers New York City. As long as you're anywhere in New York, connect the holographic VR helmet to the power source, put it on your head, and say that Start Connection command, you can connect and log into Skynet." Jillian waved at the blonde beauty not far away. Immediately, Two beautiful women came forward and connected the holographic VR helmet to the power source for him. After the holographic VR helmet's green light lit up, Jillian was about to put it on when the bodyguard suddenly reminded him in a hurry, "Boss. When you enter Skynet for the first time through the holographic VR helmet, there will be a scan of the user's body. The user needs to go through the real name authentication of the ID number to register for a lifetime-only Skynet account." "Do you think I only have one identity?" Jillian snorted coldly. Without pausing, he put the VR helmet on his head with both hands and leaned back on the leather chair. Start connection. After registering a Skynet account with a fake identity and creating a customized character, Jillian's consciousness was transferred to a mysterious and unknown place. At first, it was silent. His vision was full of dazzling light. Gradually, a lot of noise entered his ears. Soon, he could even vaguely see a blurry and strange figure flashing in front of him. Jillian subconsciously rubbed his eyes. When he opened them again, he was stunned on the spot. In the real world, his body was still lying on the chair in the villa's hall. But at this moment, he was clearly in another vast and boundless place. Behind him was a gigantic pillar of light as tall as a skyscraper. Shadows constantly flickered from within. Then, strange giants, orcs, aliens, beautiful elves from movies, celebrities, stunning beauties, and even some anime characters appeared. These were all avatars that the players had carefully selected to create. Jillian looked out and saw transparent rainbow bridges connecting in all directions. Below them were lawn fountains, paradise gardens, and tropical grasslands. In the sky, there was a bright galaxy and an upside-down sea. On the other side of the rainbow bridges, there was a pyramid civilization, a floating fortress, a futuristic city, and a space fortress battleship that had appeared in movies before. Fairy tales, myths, and two-dimensional fantasy elements blended into one, flashing with a brilliant shimmer. Looking at it, there were scenes and things that should only exist in dreams. "Sir, don't block the way." A one-eyed man accidentally bumped into Jillian's shoulder, turned around and said, and ran excitedly toward a rainbow bridge. "There's no pain. This is indeed a virtual space. But this is too real." Jillian steadied himself in shock and looked down at his hands. The character he created was a tall and strong man. His appearance were not far from a bodyguard in reality. A voice behind him seemed to answer him. It came closer and said, "Yes, it's too real." Although Stark Industries claimed that the first-generation holographic VR helmet only released 70% of the simulation, Jillian turned around and saw that it was a punk-style youth who was ruining things. The punk youth also looked at him and said with a familiar smile, "Hello, I'm Z. Of course, this is just a game name. No one wants to talk about reality on Skynet." "Elaine," Jillian replied coldly. Z laughed and said, "Don't be like that, brother Elaine. I just registered and logged into Skynet. I'm a pure newbie. Do you want to form a team and get to know it?" Jillian thought for a moment and nodded. "Sure. Then come with me." I couldn't resist just reading the manual. "There are a few places in particular that I want to take a look at first." Z reached out and pulled out a floating window awkwardly. He invited Elaine to form a team and opened the navigation map option. "What places?" Jillian suddenly regretted entering without reading the manual. Now, he was a newbie who didn't even know how to operate it. "Didn't you read the detailed introduction of Skynet on the official website?" Z waved his hands excitedly. Other than the dating platform in the leisure area, the creator Caesar created two special areas for Skynet to play. One is the World War II battlefield for shooting and strategy enthusiasts. The second is a virtual city based on New York, Gotham City. Chapter 371. In the Skynet virtual world, Caesar had not only created a casual zone for entertainment and fantasy, but he had also asked the Lord God to create two special play zones with AI characters, PK, and missions. The first space was set during the early stages of the Second World War, and players could choose to join any country or faction at random. Players could control their own characters to join the army, go through rigorous recruit training and assessment, and follow the highly realistic intelligent AI troops, and use the retro-strategic weapons of the time to throw themselves into the rain of bullets on the two world battlefields of Europe and the Pacific. The war in the virtual world might have a completely different future due to the participation of players. Here, Caesar had set up a special game Easter egg. Players could join the Hydra organization, but once they joined, they would not be able to leave. The system would also give out bounties and hunting missions to all players of the other factions. Players of the Hydra faction would be hunted down or assassinated to death, and they would drop a game item called Red Skull Underwear. This was also why Caesar had repeatedly whipped the corpses of the Hydra organization. Players could also play the role of a fleeing merchant, doctor, or civilian. They could personally experience the disaster and grief brought about by the World War half a century ago. They could even sneak into countries unaffected by the flames of war and explore the world's scenery with close to 100% freedom. Players only had one life in these special spaces. Once their health bar reached 0, they would drop all their items and money. Their attributes and skills would be reset, and their military rank and title in the special zone would be taken back. Their original body would be revived on Skynet's initial light beam platform. It could be said that this game space satisfied all the pursuits of gun enthusiasts. It was also Caesar's remembrance and reminiscence of World War II. After all, that was the starting point of him starting from nothing, from a recruit to a legendary hero. The second play zone was Gotham City. The setting of the zone was the same as the year 2009 in the real world. Even the basic model of the map was modified according to the real New York City. Compared to the combat zone of the First World War zone, Gotham City was more of a gray-neutral zone. Those who broke the law would become criminals, and they would be wanted by the police and special people. Other than the doppelganger Caesar and the real Kale, no one else could understand the setting and creation of this play zone. However, the charm of this special play zone still attracted many players. Skynet Virtual Platform, Gotham City. The night sky without the moon and stars was overcast with dark clouds. Strange Gothic modern buildings stood tall, and the streets were lit with dim neon lights that were rich in mood. However, most of the lights did not cover the dark alleys that were filled with filth. From time to time, cats and dogs would pass by, revealing their green pupils. On the bustling commercial streets, intelligent AIs that looked like ordinary gentlemen and ladies walked around. Some were busy with business, some were home after work, and some were shopping. It was as if they had been living in this city since they were born, carrying out their lives in an orderly manner. Among them, there were quite a number of strange-looking pedestrians. These were all players. They wandered around in groups of 2s and 3s, whispering to each other as they explored the inner city scenery. At this moment, located at the crossroads of the commercial street, on the dome of a cathedral nearly 50 meters high, no one noticed that a handsome blonde youth was sitting on the edge of the eaves with his feet sticking out. He welcomed the night breeze and looked down at the city below with his big blue eyes. A cat with black fur jumped lightly onto his shoulder. Its tail wagged left and right, and the cat had a very happy expression on its face. Caesar glanced at the cat and said with annoyance, "I say, Eddie, why did you make your game character look like this?" The black cat raised its small face and said in human language, "Normally in the real world, don't you always sit on my shoulder? Now that we are in a virtual space, at least let me sit on your shoulder. Up to you." Caesar really could not understand Eddie's weird idea. The black cat looked down at the street. "Young master, I don't quite understand your intention in creating this Gotham City area. Your setting for this area is very strange. There is no day here, and it is always this eerie night." Caesar chuckled. "Eddie, what do you know? Only the night has the charm that the day doesn't have, and it can easily induce the darkness and fear in people's hearts. The style of the Dark series? The black cat's mouth twitched like a human. It said thoughtfully, "You even had the Lord God set this place to have a high crime rate and incompetent police. This is all on purpose, right? Now that's more immersive." The original New York was not much better than this. Caesar shrugged and changed the topic. "This is the Sims gaming area. Players can do the jobs they want here and live the life they want. It is the best virtual environment to realize Second Life." The black cat narrowed its eyes and complained, "I feel like it's not that simple. You little devil, you are very bad. Of course it's not that simple. I even created some special AI characters here." Caesar blinked his eyes meaningfully. As soon as he finished speaking, a powerful explosion suddenly occurred at the door of a bank below, causing the previously peaceful and bustling street to fall into panic and chaos. "What's going on?" The black cat's hair stood on end as it looked down. The bank's shop was ablaze, and the intense explosion caused the glass door to shatter into pieces. The AI pedestrians at the entrance panicked and fled the scene. Some of the players who were caught in the middle were also scared out of their wits. Many of the players were surprised and watched from a safe distance. Then, 3 vans stopped in front of the bank. A group of 10 masked criminals with guns entered the bank. They were well trained in their roles of looting and looting. Soon, they were carrying bags of money into the vans. During this time, 5 patrol cars approached with their sirens blaring. The criminals did not even look at them. They took out rocket launchers from the vans and fired at the police vans. The explosion and fire drowned the street. "This is robbery? That's too arrogant." Just like the other players, Black Cat sucked in a breath of cold air as her scalp tingled. She was stunned for a moment. Caesar shrugged. "The weapons of the criminals are more powerful than those of the police. That is the law of Gotham City." The black cat said angrily, "What kind of setting is this? This is too much. How would the players dare to stay here? How could they lose their equipment to the criminals? Don't be hasty. Let's wait a little longer." Caesar smiled but did not say anything. He estimated the time in his heart. It was about time for the special AI character to appear. On the street below, the armed criminals were unstoppable. After robbing the bank, they prepared to leave the scene. An injured AI police officer lay in a pool of blood. He looked at them unwillingly. With difficulty, he took out something that looked like a flashlight from his pocket and switched it on. The bright light shone into the night sky, and the imprint of a bat with its wings spread appeared in the sky. It was exposed to the eyes of the AI characters and players in the city. Chapter 372. In the virtual world, in the central area of Gotham City. The crime scene at the bank was a mess. Flames lit up the streets, and smoke rose in spirals. Everything was like a real-life movie. The AI civilians fled in all directions in fear, the criminal gangs committed crimes with their weapons, the police moaned weakly in a pool of blood, and the players watched in bewilderment from a safe distance. Even the neon lights by the roadside dimmed slightly at this moment, the light and shadows blurred. "Bat, Mark?" On the top floor of the Western-style pendulum church, the black cat was lying on Caesar's shoulder. It looked up at the strange light mark in the night sky and mumbled to itself. Everyone in the city also looked up at the mark in the night sky. It was clearly an animal that represented the dark creatures of the night, but for some reason, it had the effect of calming the panic of the civilians and intimidating the criminals. "Damn it! That guy is almost here. Hurry up and get the car out of here." Seeing this, the masked criminal leader growled savagely. There was a hint of fear and dread in his eyes. He waved his arm and called for his accomplices to get back into the modified van. At the same time, all the players within 1 kilometer of the area received a side mission notification. Option 1, trigger the side mission, stop the terrorists from escaping. As a good citizen of Gotham City, it is your duty to stop all unjust and evil forces, even at the risk of sacrificing your life. Mission requirement: use your own strength to stop the terrorists from escaping and delay them as much as possible. Mission reward: 1 Citizen of Justice badge, plus 10 Batman's favorability. Option 2, trigger the side mission, help the terrorists escape. Abandon the principles of justice and morality, cross the bottom line of the law and ethics, and follow the desires in your heart to become a member of the dark side. Mission requirement: use your own strength to help the terrorists escape and let them get away with it. Mission reward: gain the approval of evil forces, minus 10 Batman favorability. The black cat stared at the system window, dumbfounded. It glanced sideways at Caesar. This mission of yours is intentional, isn't it? Where there is justice, there is naturally evil. Gotham City has always been a place where there are 2 distinct extremes. Caesar smiled happily. Looking at the players below, he said in a low voice, "So, make your choice. What you don't dare to do in real life will be magnified in this virtual space, luring you down the path of your heart." The players below hesitated. After 3 seconds, no one chose to accept the mission. Seeing this, the black cat heaved a sigh of relief. It narrowed its eyes at Caesar and said, "That's good. Human nature is more gray, neutral, which means that it doesn't matter." Caesar smiled and didn't mind at all. He said, "I guessed it. This is because the players have just arrived at Gotham City. After they familiarize themselves with the environment and acquire a certain level of equipment, they will eventually have to make the choice between good and evil. This choice will indirectly affect reality, right? What will you do to the players who have joined the evil forces? Supervise and examine them in real life?" The black cat looked at Caesar nervously. Caesar smiled but didn't say anything. In the virtual world, people tended to be more inclined to their own choices. Bang! Since no player stepped forward to stall for time, the criminal gang drove the modified van filled with cash and knocked away the wreckage of the police car that was lying across the road. Then, they sped up and disappeared around the corner of the intersection. However, just as the 3 modified vans reached the corner, a black shadow suddenly flashed across the side lane. The exhaust of the engine behind the van spurted out blue high-temperature exhaust flames, and the giant low 4-wheel drive wheels rubbed against the high-speed road, creating sparks. With a beautiful drift, the van stopped in the middle of the road, forcing the criminal gang's vehicles to stop abruptly. What the hell is that? The players at the scene were stunned. The thing that stopped the gang was a strange-looking bat-shaped sports car. However, compared to the usual luxurious, expensive, and cool sports cars, the car in front of him was more ferocious, robust, domineering, and heavyweight. It was equipped with 4-wheel drive wheels of a heavy-duty car, and the body of the car was covered with bulletproof steel plates that were cold and dark. The shape of the car was like a nocturnal bat, and it was extremely eye-catching. "It's Batman! Hurry up and break through!" The terrorist leader yelled and grabbed the driver's wheel from the front passenger seat. He stepped on the accelerator and drove the modified van toward the Batmobile in front of him. The Batmobile was not to be outdone. Its engine roared as it rammed into the van. Bam! The 2 vans collided violently. The modified van was big, but when it was hit by the shorter Batmobile, the front of the van was smashed into pieces. It was like a big man being tackled to the ground by a short boy. The wheels were still spinning at high speed, and the van rolled 360 degrees on the road with the people inside. The doors and windows of the van were damaged, and a large amount of cash flew out, raining down on the road. The Batmobile stopped on the road unscathed. The door opened, and a mysterious man in a black bat uniform stepped out. He was tall and burly, and his uniform couldn't hide his perfect and muscular body. He wore a black cloak that reached his calves, and he wore a bat mask and a helmet with ears. Only his chin was revealed, and his eyes flashed with white light through some kind of device. "It's Batman!" many AI civilians exclaimed. The expressions of the criminals in the remaining two vans changed drastically when they saw the man blocking their way. "Continue to fight. Retreat immediately." Now that the criminal leader's van had been taken care of, the remaining gangs immediately had different opinions. The criminals in one of the vans got out of the van and prepared to fight Batman, while the vans in the back started to reverse, wanting to retreat. Batman suddenly moved and dashed 10 meters away. Although the criminals who got out of the van had already opened fire, the bullets all landed behind and on both sides of him. Batman closed in and used both his hands and feet to display exquisite and powerful combat skills. In just a few seconds, the criminals who had the advantage of guns and numbers were all neatly knocked to the ground. None of them could last more than 2 or 3 rounds with him, a top human who had been set up as a combat master. After taking care of the criminals who got out of the van to fight him, Batman raised his head coldly and looked at the criminal vans that had fled 100 meters away. He suddenly raised his hand and launched a steel claw which hooked onto the wall of a building in the distance. The steel cable pulled him straight into the sky. In the sky, Batman opened his hands, and his cape seemed to turn into bat wings as he swiftly chased after the remaining criminal vans. Witnessing this dramatic turn of events with their own eyes, not just the AI civilians, but even the players were stunned as they watched Batman leave in a daze. Batman didn't say anything during the entire process of punishing the criminals, but his actions and methods weren't sloppy at all. He was like a dark knight who lived purely for justice. Chapter 373. It would be developed and manufactured in 3 days. On the 4th day, it would be released for sale. On the same day, it would officially start operations in New York. The virtual space, Skynet, and the holographic VR helmet, these futuristic technological creations, were miraculously and rapidly born in less than half a week. Many players who bought the holographic VR helmet with a dubious mentality because of the fame of Stark Industries and Caesar immediately fell into the virtual world after trying it a little. They could get rid of the constraints of reality and create new virtual characters. They could easily travel around the world and the universe at home. They could join a country's army and fight with real guns and bullets. They could make friends with superheroes and evil villains. They could explore the dark underwater world or the dazzling city in the sky. They could even dance in an interstellar bar the size of the moon. In Skynet, players could satisfy all their fantasies. The Son of God, Caesar, has taken the first step into the legendary realm. The holographic VR helmet. This is the greatest high-tech product in the 21st century. There is no other. Skynet has arrived. A new virtual era has officially begun. What are you waiting for? No one could resist the charm of the virtual world of Skynet. The news media that bought the holographic VR helmet turned into the ultimate water army for the first time. The newspapers and short messages on the internet were full of positive publicity. There was not a single negative or even positive review. The local people in New York were in an uproar. It was as if they did not buy a holographic helmet, they would be completely out of touch with the current era. It triggered an unprecedented craze and popularity. Other cities and countries went crazy. With red eyes, they applied for Stark Industries to cover Skynet outside of New York as soon as possible. If in the 1920s, Stark Industries used mobile phones, computers, and firearms to officially create an immortal business empire, then today's holographic VR helmet not only allowed it to directly get out of the trough predicament it was in, but it also added a brilliant and unsolvable aura of invincibility. On the outskirts of New York, in a remote ancient villa building. With a violent thud, the VR helmet hit the ground hard. The front glass shield immediately shattered into several pieces. The wreckage and parts scattered all over the smooth floor. The blonde beauty in a sexy dress leaned against the wall not far away, trembling. She did not dare to make a sound. The bulky bodyguard looked at the wreckage on the ground with a slight heartache. Looking at the furious Jillian, he asked cautiously, "Boss, what should we do now?" It wasn't easy for us to make Stark Industries fall to the bottom, and we were surrounded by negative news. Now, this new technological product. You don't have to tell me, I know. Jillian gritted his teeth and clenched his fists, his face full of unwillingness. After personally understanding the Skynet, he knew that the previous conspiracy and operation against Stark Industries had been completely scrapped. Too powerless. 20 years ago, he had experienced this feeling of powerlessness due to the difference in their abilities from Tony Stark. However, he did not expect that today, 20 years later, he, who had developed the ultimate creature and thought that he stood at the pinnacle of the biological field, would have to learn from a child who was not even 1 year old. We haven't lost yet. Jillian's eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the bodyguard like a wild beast. His voice was hoarse as he ordered, "Send all of our men to Stark Industries in New York. Blow up that building. At any cost." The bodyguard sucked in a breath of cold air and hurriedly replied, "Yes. I'll arrange it right away." After the bodyguard left, Jillian narrowed his eyes coldly and muttered to himself, "Didn't you declare war? Then, as you wish." On the other side. Stark Industries, inside the chairman's office in the main office building. Annie was wearing her usual work uniform. Her shiny and slender blonde hair was draped over her shoulders, paired with a knee-length skirt and long black stockings. She was holding a document in her hands as she stood upright and waited. In front of her, there were 2 biological cabins, one big and one small. The cabins were made of silver metal and resembled the freezer cabins of space capsules. It was marked with a design made by Stark Industries. At this time, it was closed and in an operating state. This was a holographic VR function cabin, which was still in the internal use stage. Compared to the helmets on the market, the function cabin could achieve 95% realism. After the user entered the Skynet, it could provide nutrients to the body continuously. With my salary, I can only afford a VR helmet, right? Annie looked at the function cabin and sighed slightly. After all, Caesar had said that the price of the function cabin would be more than 100 times higher than the helmet. Click, the 2 function cabins made a beeping sound. Then the doors of the cabins opened, revealing Caesar and Eddie lying inside. Both of them were only wearing casual shorts. Their upper bodies were naked, and their bodies were surrounded by white cold air. Annie didn't say anything and waited patiently. After a few seconds, Caesar and Eddie opened their eyes and got up drowsily from the cabins as if they had just woken up. "Wow, why are you here?" When Eddie saw Annie standing in front of the cabin, he was shocked and hurriedly covered his private parts with both hands. "Oh, Annie. I appointed her as my personal secretary. She has the authority to enter the chairman's office." Caesar wasn't surprised. His body floated and his whole body left the cabin. He stretched in the air in the room. "I've seen what I should see. Why are you still covering up?" Annie spat and ignored Eddie. She picked up a small shirt and put it on for Caesar. "Buddy. Do you want me to put it on for you?" Toxin laughed strangely and reached out a black tentacle. It swayed back and forth in front of Eddie's eyes. "No need." Eddie quickly walked out of the utility cabin, picked up a t-shirt, and put it on his head. After putting on the shirt, Caesar leaned back as if he was sitting in the air. He asked Annie, "Since you're here, is there any news from the Overgod?" Eddie couldn't help but look at Annie when he heard that. "Yes." Annie nodded and handed a document to Caesar. An hour ago, the Overgod found a place in the outskirts of New York. A user with an abnormal body temperature used a holographic VR device to access Skynet. "That's right." Caesar smiled and took the document. The GM of Skynet was the Overgod. The VR device also had the ability to scan a person's body and pinpoint their location. Young master. I didn't expect them to fall for it. I thought they would have to wait until tomorrow or the day after, Eddie said happily. Caesar crossed his arms and said confidently, if their target is Stark Industries, they will definitely try to buy the holographic VR device as soon as it comes out. Eddie continued, clenched his fist, and said proudly, when they know that they can't stop Stark Industries from getting out of trouble, their primary target is no longer Stark Industries and Miss Potts. Instead, they will directly shift their target to you, young master. Young Master Caesar, then aren't you in danger now? Annie's hair stood on end. She looked at Caesar worriedly. Caesar smiled and didn't answer the question. Eddie also smiled and looked at Caesar. He said playfully, young master. When do you think they will make a move on you? Caesar was about to speak when his ears twitched. He looked out the window, and his line of sight instantly reached 10 miles away. Caesar narrowed his eyes. They are already here. Batman was maintaining order in the virtual Gotham City. It was time for Superman in the real world to take off in New York. Chapter 374. It's here? Hearing Caesar's inexplicable words, Annie was still in a daze. Eddie also looked at the floor-to-ceiling window in the office and suddenly realized something as he shouted, poison. I know, it's a fatal danger to humans, hurry up and put on the mask. The moment Poison's slightly hoarse voice sounded, a black liquid immediately overflowed from Eddie's body. Poison's body wrapped around his body at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then it quickly expanded and molded into a complete tough shell for fighting. About half a second later, Eddie had transformed into a tall and burly dark monster. He had a pair of long and fierce white eyes. His bulging muscles and hideous tattoos were a shocking sight to behold, but it also gave the petite Annie an indescribable sense of security. At the same time, Caesar floated in the air of the office and calmly stared at the blue sky outside the window. There was a scorching white wave passing through the sky at supersonic speed, and in the blink of an eye, it passed through countless high-rise buildings and headed straight for the main office of Stark Industries where they were. What the hell is that? Annie opened her eyes wide in shock, and the vague outline of a missile was reflected in her beautiful pupils. In a panic, she could only cover her wide-open mouth with both hands, and her thin and delicate body trembled in fear as she kept retreating to a position against the wall until there was no place to retreat. When humans faced with such a high-end hot weapon attack, they had no choice but to wait for death. Don't worry, I'm here. Eddie suddenly let out a low growl and got into a running posture. Both of his legs suddenly sprinted, and the powerful burst of energy even shattered the floor where he was standing. He rushed a few steps forward violently, and when he approached the window, he sped up again and leaped forward. Clang! Eddie simply broke through the French window. His extraordinary leap made him look as if he had a rocket installed on his back. He leaped 50 meters in the air at the same level as the horizon. Then, he spread his huge hands and exposed his sturdy chest. Just like that, he gave a bear hug to the missile that was coming from afar at an extremely fast speed. He was going to use his body to intercept the missile and prevent the Stark Industries building from taking the destructive blow head-on. Don't! Seeing this suicidal scene, Annie shouted, but in the next moment, her voice was completely suppressed by the sound waves that were hundreds of times louder. Boom! The thunderous explosion resounded over half of New York City. The local people in New York looked up and were shocked to see an explosion cloud in the sky in front of the Stark office building. The frenzied shockwaves rippled outwards inch by inch. Although the Stark Industries office building did not hit the missile head-on, the aftermath of the powerful missile explosion still shattered the glass on the surface of the entire building in an instant. The air pressure rushed in, causing the people and chairs in the room to tumble to the other side of the wall. A tall dark human figure broke the guardrail outside the window, and then bounced back into the chairman's office. Eddie, are you okay? With a helpless sob, Annie fumbled around the office, but due to the thick smoke, she couldn't find his exact location. Don't worry. Eddie won't die so easily after being hit by a normal missile. Even at this time, Caesar's young voice was still calm and gentle. His small body rose to the top of the room, and he puffed up his cheeks and blew around his body. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew out from his small mouth. It whistled and blew away the thick smoke that lingered in the room through the window. The view in the waiting room gradually became clear. Annie saw that the original office had already been destroyed. There was a deep trench on the floor from the window to the inside. Eddie, who was completely covered, was sitting in the corner at the end. Half of his body was deeply embedded in the wall, and he looked like he had been hollowed out. The dark monster's body was emitting a hot burnt smell. Cough, cough. This sour feeling is really hard to describe in words. Eddie was in so much pain that he bared his fangs and spat out circles of black smoke. He slowly stood up from the broken wall. When he saw Annie, who was in tears, he touched the back of his head and said, "Annie, don't tell me you're crying because you're worried about me." "Who's worried about you?" Annie blushed and spat. She was not surprised that Eddie could withstand the missile. Not only was he not seriously injured, but he also recovered in such a short time. Be serious. Don't embarrass the enemy, Caesar complained. At this time, the smoke outside the window had quietly dispersed. What followed was the sound of many aircraft engines. The few of them looked towards the source of the sound. They could see a few military helicopters and fighter jets approaching the office from afar. F***CK, are you bullying me because I can't fly? Eddie whispered hoarsely. After being completely covered by the poison, his temperament had turned cold and murderous. He shook off the ashes on his body and was about to rush out to fight the enemy. "All right, wait for a moment." Caesar waved his hand and stopped him. He said unhappily, "Aerial combat is not your strength. You stay and protect Annie." But Eddie was about to say something when Caesar interrupted him. "No buts." "All right then." Eddie was helpless. He could not do anything to Caesar. He could only turn around and carry the petite Annie with his thick arms. The two of them looked like a beauty and a beast. "Leave the rest to me and the Overlord." Caesar stretched and suddenly accelerated in the air. He was like a falcon flapping its wings. He accelerated and flew out of the building. He turned into a stream of light and disappeared in the direction where the enemy aircraft appeared. Annie was shocked again. She watched as Caesar's small figure disappeared into the distance. She looked up at Eddie and asked nervously, "Eddie, what should we do now? If something happens to the young master, Stark Industries, which has finally gotten out of the trough, will be finished." Eddie grinned and said emotionally, "Believe in the young master." To be honest, when I first met the young master, I didn't believe what the poison said to me. Now, I'm finally sure of it, and I'm convinced. What do you mean? Annie asked in surprise. Eddie took a deep breath and said seriously, "The young master is very strong. He's even stronger than me now." Thousands of meters away from the Stark Industries office building, hundreds of meters in the air. 5 armed helicopters buzzed as they flew. They were connected to Jillian on the outskirts of New York. "Boss." The first missile was intercepted about 50 meters away from the target building. "I suspect that Stark Industries has installed a missile interceptor system." "Missile interceptor system?" "I've been working in that building for half a year. How come I don't know about this?" Jillian was a little confused when he heard the report. He replied sternly, "Continue to bombard with the ammunition provided by the armed helicopters." "Yes." Not long after, the terrorist who was flying the armed helicopters reported anxiously, Boss, we detected an unknown object approaching us. It's very small, but it's very fast." Chapter 375. In the outskirts of New York, in the basement of an ancient villa. What is that little guy? Concentrate all your firepower. We need to retreat immediately or send emergency reinforcements. His speed is too fast, it's hard to lock onto him. The communication line from the armed helicopter sent back by the dispatch team was a mess of voices coming back from tens of kilometers away. The vague words of the pilots were filled with shock and uncontrollable screams of fear. It was as if they had encountered a destructive attack from a mysterious enemy. Tell me clearly, what did you see and who are you fighting with? Ji Lian's forehead was covered with bean-sized sweat, dripping down and wetting his white shirt. He shouted into the microphone, hoping to get some feedback from the enemy, but several communication channels on the other side began to fail one after another. Boss, help! After the last scream faintly sounded, the communication channel was only left with a strange busy tone, and the basement fell into an extremely oppressive silence. Ji Lian's face was pale, he slumped on the chair and stared blankly at the communication desk. He didn't need to use his brain to know that the underground forces that he had cultivated for 20 years had mostly disappeared at that moment. He thought that after Iron Man left Earth, no one would be able to stop his plan, but he didn't expect that a child would appear out of nowhere and turn the fruits that he had cultivated over the years into a colorful bubble that would burst with a single poke. After a moment, Ji Lian suddenly stood up, his hands clenched into fists, his nails completely digging into his palms. The pain forced him to calm down. I haven't lost yet, I still have a very important hostage in my hands. Ji Lian took a deep breath, hurriedly took off his suit jacket, threw it on the ground, and rushed upstairs. Everyone gather, go and bring pots down from the second floor, we're going to evacuate this place. Ji Lian ran and shouted anxiously, until he reached the stairs on the first floor. He realized that something was wrong, all the movements of his body suddenly stopped. In the grand and spacious hall on the first floor, it was quiet, not to mention the bodyguard's response, not even half a blonde beauty's shadow could be seen. Where did everyone go at this critical moment? Ji Lian whispered blankly. He didn't transfer the bodyguards in the villa away. The ones who were sent to attack Stark Industries were the armed forces stationed in other places. At this moment, a young voice sounded in the hall. Oh, you took the initiative to come up, I've been waiting for you here for a while. Who is it? Ji Lian was shocked. His body was on high alert as he walked towards the source of the strange voice. When he got close to the sofa, he was shocked to find that a little blonde boy was lying on the sofa chair at some point in time. You look familiar, I seem to have seen you before. While Killian was looking at the blonde boy, the boy was also looking at him with his eyes wide open. A strange and innocent smile appeared on his fair little face. What? I just declared war on you a few days ago. Have you forgotten so quickly? Caesar curled his lips in slight displeasure. He took out a lollipop from his pocket and immediately tore open the plastic wrapper and stuffed it into his mouth. Jillian's face was gloomy and uncertain. He looked at the corridor and courtyard outside the villa and asked calmly, "Where are my bodyguards?" Obviously, they were all killed by my people. While Caesar was talking, there was a clear sound of footsteps on the stairs. Ji Lian looked up and saw a classic model Iron Man with gold and red paint walking down the stairs. The mechanical hands were still holding the unconscious Miss Potts. Iron Man, you still came back. Ji Lian looked like he was facing a great enemy and couldn't help but take a step back. But then, the front door behind him suddenly opened. Two identical Mark III Iron Men, some parts of their bodies still had burn marks from the fierce battle with the genetically modified people, walked into the hall with slightly stiff movements. 3 Iron Mans. Killian was really scared this time. Caesar explained in a childish voice, "Don't panic. They are not tawny, they are just Iron Man suits controlled by the artificial intelligence Lord God." Battle suit. Ji Lian stared at one of the Iron Men. The mask of the Iron Man suddenly opened, revealing the empty body of the unmanned vehicle, as well as the intricate parts with extremely high craftsmanship and the shining Krypton energy core. Caesar continued with the candy in his mouth. In the past few days, I not only asked the Lord God to create Skynet and holographic VR helmets, but also restarted the secret studio left by Tani. Using the Mark III he created as a prototype, I mass-produced a batch of Iron Man army to deal with your genetically modified people. The next result, Caesar didn't need to say more, Ji Lian already knew. Just now, the top technological battle suit created by Tani and the ultimate modified creatures he created had a life and death battle outside the villa. Obviously, in the end, his modified people were completely wiped out. In fact, this was not a fair battle. After all, the battle suit had no life. As long as there were enough materials and energy, it could be mass-produced continuously. In the battle between the top technology and the top creature's invention, in the end, Tony Stark won by a little. Ji Lian said to himself in disappointment, his beliefs collapsed, his years of hard work were hit hard by reality, and he leaned on the back of the sofa without strength. Caesar looked at Ji Lian and said bluntly, "I'm sorry. Tani's battle suit invention can indeed be regarded as a major field of top technology, and your so-called ultimate biological research is still far from the top field of biology." "What did you say?" Ji Lian looked at Caesar with a slightly distorted face as if he was provoked. Everything he had could be trampled on or denied, but the ultimate biological research that he had worked hard for half his life was his reverse scale that could not be touched. "I've said it very clearly." Caesar jumped off the sofa and walked to Ji Lian step by step. He raised his small head and said uninterestedly, "Your ultimate biological research can only be regarded as a failed semi-finished product, it can't be called the top at all. A mere genetically modified human body could only produce a temperature below 1,500 degrees Celsius, and any higher and it would self-destruct. If this could be called the top field of biology, then what would Hulk, which Quicksilver, and even Captain Marvel be? You deserve to die." Ji Lian roared and suddenly launched an attack, fiercely pouncing on Caesar. His body temperature rapidly soared in the air, his skin was red, and his internal organs and bones could be seen. He did not see how Caesar dodged. He only saw his small feet move, and then Ji Lian, who was surrounded by lava, flew back at an extremely fast speed, smashing through the wall and smashing into the fountain in the courtyard outside, and was swallowed by the water with a sizzling sound. Caesar looked at the rising water vapor, shrugged and said, "There's one more thing I forgot to tell you. The one who dealt with those armed helicopters just now was not the Iron Man army, but me." Chapter 376. The crisis of Stark Industries was eliminated after the villain behind the scenes was arrested. Caesar handed over the remaining genetically modified people to SHELD, and the Avengers to clean up the mess. Due to Skynet and the holographic VR helmet, New York's economic and technological development was several times faster than in previous years. It was at the forefront of the trend of the times, and there was an amazing trend of gradually turning from the economic city to the city of the future. At the same time, Caesar was in front of the Stark office building, blocking the terrorists' helicopter in the air alone. The details of this incident were recorded by many passers-by in videos, which were frequently broadcast on the internet, newspapers, and even TV, causing a shock and uproar all over the world. A child less than 1 year old had the creative ability of Iron Man, the extraordinary strength of the symbol of peace, and the righteous character of Captain America. Caesar's limelight completely took off after this battle. Some people called him the second generation of heroes. After all, he was the descendant of the symbol of peace. Such achievements were worthy of the name of a hero family. Some people called him the Son of God. After all, Caesar was still very young, but as one of the most powerful superheroes on Earth, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was a god. There were even more people who preferred another brand new name, Superman. In other words, a mortal who was beyond the scope of human beings. Of course, no matter how the people discussed it, even if they called him Superman in the end, Caesar would not pay attention to it. The safe return of Potts quickly stabilized the morale within Stark Industries. The one who benefited the most was undoubtedly Caesar himself. He once again became a hands-off shopkeeper, leaving the production of new products to the Lord God. He officially returned to his leisure life after waking up. From time to time, he would go to the SHELD base to practice his combat skills with Captain America and master the constantly increasing strength of his body. Or he would go to Stark Industries to guide the research direction of new technological products and integrate some black technology into the current New York City. Sometimes, he would even drag Eddie along, and the two of them would be busy running back and forth between the southern and northern hemispheres. They would rescue large aircraft that had crashed, annihilate rampant terrorists, and even intervene in natural disasters that happened in certain areas. This was the daily life of Caesar's clone on Earth. Another 2.5 years passed. During this period, Earth did not suffer from any foreign invasion. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner under peaceful circumstances. December 24, 2011, Christmas. Today was a brand new day. In the early morning of winter, the golden sunlight shone down in the cold air, and the light overflowed into the window sill on the 21st floor of a residential building. Inside, Eddie's clothes were scattered on the floor. He was wearing a full set of pajamas, hugging a bulging quilt and sleeping soundly on the bed. A black cat was lying lazily beside the bed, snoring as well. Dong! Dong! Suddenly, there was a slight knocking sound outside the window. Eddie, it seems that someone is knocking on the window. A woman under the quilt reminded him with a lisp. How is that possible? This is the 21st floor. Eddie mumbled in a daze. He didn't even want to open his eyes. He turned over and continued to fall into the winter dream. Meow. Surprisingly, the black cat woke up. It squinted its eyes and stretched its body. It squatted on the ground and wagged its tail. It looked at the window covered by the curtains, and there was a hint of human-like understanding in its vertical beastly eyes. Dong! Dong! The knocking sound continued, but Eddie in the room was still unmoved. After 3 seconds of silence, the window seemed to have been bombarded by a powerful explosion. Under the humming sound of air pressure, the entire wall shattered and collapsed inwards. Dust billowed, and sunlight from outside flooded the room without any obstructions. Damn, an earthquake? Eddie was awakened by the loud noise. He jumped out of bed, no longer sleepy, and looked out of the window anxiously. There was a blond boy about 5 years old, stepping on air and walking into the room. He had a lollipop in his mouth, his left hand in his trouser pocket, and the other hand waving at him. Morning, Eddie. Morning, young master. Eddie replied subconsciously. He glanced blankly at the wall that was heavily damaged by an external force. Then, as if he had just woken up from a dream, he gritted his teeth and said, "Earlier? Can you come in through the front door next time? I've asked people to repair the windows and the outer wall dozens of times." The black cat jumped onto the bed, licked its paws, and gloated. "I'll knock on the window." Caesar replied without any expression. Oh, I see." Eddie nodded, and hesitated for half a second. He couldn't help but growl, "Knock on the door." "Bastard." Caesar pointed at the hole in the wall and suggested seriously, "Why don't you open a door on the wall next time?" "All right. You came to me so early, and where are you going? Don't tell me you're going to fight some deep-sea monsters again." Eddie didn't have the strength to complain. He reached out his hand to the black cat, and the black liquid that was the main body of the poison immediately separated from the black cat and merged back into his body. "Isn't it Christmas today?" As he said that, Caesar smiled and said, "The Avengers have a group dinner at noon. Steve informed me and asked me to bring you along." "Dinner? That's more like it." Eddie exhaled lightly, changed his clothes, and prepared to follow Caesar to SHELD base. However, when he turned around, he saw Caesar standing at the edge of the damaged wall, looking at the distant sky with a serious expression. "What's wrong now?" Seeing this, Eddie walked over in surprise. When he raised his head, he was shocked to find that there was a strange five-colored light and shadow in the sky over there. Caesar's eyes were complicated. After a moment of silence, he whispered, "An outsider has come to Earth." "What did you say?" Eddie's body trembled, but he quickly felt relieved. He clenched his fists tightly. "After waiting for so long, it's finally here. Let's go, let's meet up with the Avengers first." Caesar grabbed Eddie's arm. His body moved, and in a flash, he moved from the room to the top floor of the building. Then, he turned into a stream of light and rushed into the distance at supersonic speed. At this time, Earth was separated by an unknown number of light-years in the distant outer space. Up, down, left, and right, there was no end to the distance. It was pitch black and lonely, with only a few planets flickering weakly as coordinates. An Eagle-style space warship with a blue flame trailing behind it kept jumping light-years, as if it was drifting aimlessly in outer space. Although its speed far exceeded any spaceship on Earth, it was undoubtedly crawling at the speed of a turtle in the vast Milky Way. 3 years had passed since Kale and the others set off from Earth and fumbled their way to the Milky Way Alliance. These 3 years of interstellar travel were not completely wasted. At least in the constant correction of the itinerary, there were rumors of Earth's terrifying natives appearing in a corner of the universe. And after repeated confirmation, the Eagle space warship finally approached the region called the Milky Way Alliance. Chapter 377. Inside the Eagle space warship. Beep beep, in the spaceship lounge that was full of technology, 3 frozen hibernation chambers were arranged in a row. Only the hibernation chamber in the middle was in operation. Estimated hibernation time reached. Beginning awakening, following the mechanical notification, the door of the hibernation chamber slowly opened. White cold air gushed out, revealing a curvy and seductive female body. It was a beautiful young lady about 23 years old. Her facial features were exquisite and perfect, and her dark green curly hair was laid lazily at the bottom of the chamber. She wore a tight and comfortable spacesuit, and her breathing rate was so low that it was almost zero. She was like a sleeping beauty in a fairy tale who slept on an ice bed. After the chamber door opened for a while, the young lady's slender eyelashes trembled slightly, and her delicate eyebrows furrowed slightly. Her consciousness gradually emerged from her long sleep. She opened her beautiful eyes that were as bright as gemstones. After blinking blankly, she instinctively sat up. When her vision entered the familiar lounge of the space warship, her brain's corresponding thoughts returned to the embrace of reality. "Did you sleep well, Lorna?" It was the same system notification as before, but it seemed like an AI program had been replaced, and it was more like a humanized tease. Vice. Lorna covered her forehead, still feeling a little uncomfortable after waking up. Her bare feet stepped on the floor, and she left the hibernation chamber. She approached the transparent floor-to-ceiling window of the lounge and stretched her curvy body. "How long did I sleep this time, boss, and Tani?" Vice replied, "You slept for 60 days and 7 hours, almost a year. Tani and Jarvis stayed in the workshop for a long time, while boss stayed in the pilot's cabin." "So long?" Lorna was shocked. She thought she had only slept for a month or 2, but she didn't expect a year to pass. Long. Really? Vice didn't think so. After all, artificial intelligence creatures had an almost endless amount of time since they were created. Kale, who had long become a god, also didn't feel anything about time. "If I had known, I wouldn't have slept." Lorna was a little frustrated. This was an opportunity that Yutong had fought for her to accompany her boss. If she wasted most of this interstellar journey sleeping, who would she cry to? I've already informed the boss. He wants you to go to the main cockpit, Vice said through the microphone. He didn't know what Lorna was thinking. Boss is looking for me? I'll head over immediately. Lorna blurted out. She had just taken a few steps when she suddenly stopped and looked down at her body. She turned around and waved her hand embarrassedly. Wait for me. I'll take a shower first. Even though she had been in the hibernation chamber all this time, not to mention obvious dirt, she couldn't even be contaminated by bacteria or dust. However, as a woman, it was still hard for her to accept the thought of not bathing for a year. Half an hour later. Lorna was wearing a loose fabric shirt. She was wiping her dark green curly hair with a towel. A few strands of hair were draped over her shoulders or draped over her collarbone, giving off a mature and seductive feminine charm. His fingerprint was unlocked, and he opened the door of the main cockpit. As soon as Lorna stepped into the main cockpit, a strong gust of hot wind blew over. The heat waves were rolling, and her wet dark green hair was instantly dried. What's going on? Lorna's eyes widened in shock and bewilderment. Inside the spacious main cockpit, the silver-haired Kale stood and floated in midair. Indescribable light and heat energy gathered in his fists and legs, and circles of scorching light ripples spread out in the air, maintaining the temperature in the room above 50 degrees Celsius. As if he had heard Lorna's exclamation, Kyle's eyes suddenly opened, and a light as bright as day flashed through his eyes. Then, the indescribable strange energy in his body began to die down, and the light in the room gradually returned to its normal comfortable state. Kale landed on the floor and heaved a sigh of relief. He waved at Lorna, who was at the door. Lorna immediately went over and hugged one of his arms naturally. As the aurora lingered, she helped him to a seat on the side without asking any questions. Boss, have some water. Lorna reached out and skillfully used magnetic field mastery, and a metal thermos flew over from the cockpit. Kale took the thermos, unscrewed the cap, and gulped down half the bottle of water. Only then did a relieved expression appear on his handsome face. Boss, what was that just now? Lorna looked at Kale worriedly. She had seen fire elemental divine power many times, but it was definitely not the terrifying scene of energy raging and fluctuating like just now. Also, it was too thought-provoking to be able to make Kale, who had a divine body, feel tired. You're talking about this, right? Kale smiled faintly. He gently snapped his fingers in front of Lorna's eyes, and a dazzling energy stream quickly appeared between his fingers and disappeared in an instant. Lorna's hair stood on end as she faced the materialization of that energy at close range. She truly felt an extremely destructive power from it. Actually, I don't know what's going on either. The chair was only for one person. Kale shrugged nonchalantly and pulled Lorna's soft body into his arms. He let her sit on his lap and gently sniffed the pleasant fragrance of her dark green hair. He also sank into deep thought about the current situation of his body. For someone like him who pursued evolution and strength, this naturally wasn't caused by the domination of his lower body. He simply felt that this position was comfortable, so he did it without any worries. The usually arrogant and cold punk girl Lorna was currently lying in Kale's arms with her eyes narrowed like an obedient kitten. Kale didn't think too much and continued, half a year ago, I sparred with Tawny, who had modified the new battle suit. I used my body to take his strengthened palm light cannon head-on. From then on, a brand new energy suddenly appeared in my body. As long as it fused with fire elemental divine power, it would become that strange energy just now. It was as if a key had suddenly appeared in a sealed box and unlocked it within his body. No wonder. The energy you released just now, apart from the scorching fire elemental characteristics of the past, was mixed with even more powerful light elemental characteristics. Lorna nodded thoughtfully and asked Kale worriedly, this change won't harm your body, will it? That won't happen. Kale shook his head and said, I can feel that the potential of this fused energy is far greater than just the fire elemental divine power from before. However, it takes too much energy and stamina. Even though I spent half a year controlling it, I still can't perfectly control it. The fire divine power that had fused with the mysterious energy source was indeed much more powerful and destructive. Furthermore, it could strengthen one's physical body. However, it was precisely because it was far too powerful that it could be destroyed with a single thought. It was very difficult to adjust its precise release and use. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.